Hi, my name is Kerry Holzman. I'm the co-host of a free digital broadcast. It's called Tech Vets, or Veterans of Technology, and it's all about running a computer repair business. Every episode is unrehearsed, unscripted, and completely raw, genuine, and authentic. As myself and my co-host Mike Smith, who each run our own computer repair businesses, we've each worked as both employees and employers, talk about the trials and tribulations of running a computer repair business in different parts of the country. I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona. He's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There's different cultures. Mike tends to work more on the larger side of the companies with servers and more complex requirements regarding things like HIPAA compliance and other forms of governmental compliance with financial companies and health agencies and such. Whereas I tend to work more with the small office and medium-sized office, and generally I don't work with servers much. I try and avoid that as much as possible, or try to actually replace servers with network-attached storage devices to bring the costs down for my customers. I find my customers, many of them who had servers, didn't need them, and it's reduced their costs immensely by going to network-attached storage devices. But anyway, you can learn more about the trials and tribulations of running a computer repair business by listening to this podcast or digital broadcast completely for free. It's always available 24/7, 365 days a year. You can go back and listen all the way back to episode 1 and work your way forward. I think we're up to about episode 125 now as I film this. This is mid-July. And the website, of course, I got to tell you the website so you can find it. It's www.tech-vets.com. So it's if you have a computer repair business, if you're thinking of getting into the computer repair business, we talk about things you may not have thought about that you have to deal with, or you eventually will have to deal with in this business. Like I said, it's all raw, unscripted, unrehearsed. It's very real. It's very genuine. And it's coming from real technicians. Mike's been in the business about as long as I have. We've each been in the business about 25 years. You combine that, that's 50 years of experience between the two of us. And we certainly don't know everything. We're beating our head against the wall, learning things the hard way. There's really no schooling that prepares you for this. I mean, you can go to college and get a degree in business administration, but that doesn't really help you on the technical side on fixing a computer. But to answer that question, if you wanted to go to college to be a computer technician, you definitely want to take business administration. Anytime you want to be self-employed, regardless, even if you don't want to be self-employed, even if you want to work for somebody else, that business administration degree is going to raise the ceiling on how high up you can go. So what appears to be a great job at 18 or 19 years old may end up being a low-paying job with no place to go in 10 or 15 years. And what I found is in the first 18 years of my life went really, really slow. Like every day it was like, wow, to go from 12 years old to 16 years old to get my driver's license was forever. To go from 16 to being 18 and an adult was only 2 years, but it felt like forever. To go from 18 to 21 so I can buy alcohol, I don't really drink, but hey, I can buy alcohol, seemed like it took forever. And from 21 to 42 seemed like it took a week. That just seems to be the way life works. And I suppose that's a good thing. I would rather look back and think my life sped by than to wonder, when am I going to die already? Jesus, another day. It's never going to end. So ideally, you want to look back and have it all go by quickly. I think that's a good sign, right? But enough of philosophy. Let's talk about what we're doing here. This is Gaming Build 2014. Now, I want to make it clear because I get emails from people, and some people will say, hey, will you give me a computer? Or can you give me advice for parts I need? And what you need to understand is that all the parts for any computers that you see me build are through the generosity of the customers that have ordered these parts. I did not pay for any of these parts. I'm really no wealthier than you are. I don't know how much money you folks think YouTube pays, but I do this out of the goodness of my heart because I really enjoy educating people and empowering people with knowledge. I feel that this information should be free to people all over the world to to those who want it. You know, the catch-22 is that there are schools that will teach this stuff, but you got to have the money to afford the school. And if you don't have the money to afford the school, then how are you supposed to learn it so you can get a job to do it? So that's my motivation, is to teach you how to do it. And not only that, but it's a lot of fun. And there's a great sense of accomplishment, even if you don't want to do it for a living. Just to build your own computer. You know, unlike building a puzzle or a model, you know, this is a computer, when you're done, is something you're going to rely on every day. You'll rely on it for potentially work, sending out resumes, playing games, and it's built with your own two hands. And the things you can use it for are just limited to the imagination. Research, further education, all through something you built with your own hands. And further, if something should go wrong with it, which if you built it right and you selected good quality parts, you shouldn't have anything go wrong with it for a long, long time. But if and when you do, who better to fix it than the person who built it? Who's going to know that machine better than you? And there's a feeling you get when you turn that computer on the first time that there are no words to express. Anybody who's ever built their own computer and had that nervous moment the first time you hit that power switch, and that power, you know, the power came on and it booted. They can't even explain it to you. All right, but that's what I'm trying to share in my videos. And what about for those who push the power switch and it doesn't work? Oh, there's this anxiety. But you know what? You stick with it, you figure it out. And then there's an even greater sense of accomplishment when you figured it out. And that's how we learn. At least I learn best by doing, so that's how I like to teach. Now, I want to explain that my videos are a little different than others in that, well, let's take Newegg, for example. Newegg can't be really critical of anything that they review. In fact, if you notice, Newegg doesn't call their videos reviews, because they're not reviews. They're product overviews. See, they won't say anything negative about the product because they sell the product, right? Linus Tech Tips, great resource. But he's being paid by people to review their products, or to overview would be a more accurate word. So you're not getting videos from real working technicians in the business who are doing actual work for customers. The machine you're going to see me build here today on this video is going to Chicago to a real end user who, through their own generosity, has allowed me to keep their parts an extra 2 to 3 weeks, because that's how long it takes to film. So they're delaying their gratification of receiving their new computer so that I can use their parts to show you how to build a computer. So I don't have spare parts laying around to give computers to people. These are all paid for by customers. And you don't see every customer build, because not all customers have the time to wait for a film, for me to make a film. To me, to build a normal computer, usually it's about a day. Sometimes it takes 2 days, depending on the software. I figure a day for the hardware, a day for the software, but I'm also talking about a 4-hour day. I want to do something a little different in this video, and I've asked all of my viewers, and one of them answered if anybody has a GoPro camera so that I can do a POV, or point of view perspective, of what it's like to build a computer. So, I mean, you might be using it to play POV type games, right? So why not film it in a POV style? So what I've got here, I'm sure this is going to look really attractive, is I've got a GoPro Hero 1. Now, unfortunately, the Hero 1 doesn't have any way for me to see what I'm filming. I have no idea what this is pointing at right now. So I don't know if this is going to be a huge disaster or not. But the plan is I'm going to wear the Hero 1, and you should have a view of what I'm seeing in my hands as I move the parts around and install them, and then should make for a unique view on the video. And remember, everything you see here, just like Tech Vets, it's unscripted, it is unrehearsed. I may have to shoot things 3 or 4 times, depending on mistakes that I make, or old problems like this where I'm not sure what the next words are to say, so there'll be edits for that reason. But this is a genuine computer going to a real customer that I have to warranty and the way that you see me assemble. Some people think I handle parts carelessly, but I assure you, the parts are not as fragile as you believe they are. The hard drive is probably the most fragile part. And as long as you follow the steps that you see the way I show them, there's no reason that you shouldn't have the same exact experience. Now, I want to emphasize that I use certain brands. I use ASUS and Gigabyte only when it comes to motherboards. And the reason for that is the quality of the boards, the consistency of the quality is very important to me. It's my reputation going on the line, and it's my customer who's going to be inconvenienced if the system goes down, and then it's my profit that's lost if I have to go fix it under warranty. So there are people that say I use ASRock or MSI or BioStar or other boards and never had a problem with them, and that's fine. You're not building as many computers as I'm building. I'm not suggesting that other motherboard manufacturers are going to make a product that fails. I'm saying statistically speaking, ASUS and Gigabyte are less likely to fail, and what's even more important is if they fail, their support is excellent in getting a replacement. Same with CORSAIR. I've had real good experience with CORSAIR customer service on the rare occasion, and I want to emphasize that, the rare occasion that I even needed to contact them to begin with. You'll see I use EVGA EVGA video cards. Same reason. The warranties on this stuff is also longer than the warranties on the cheaper stuff. When you pick the cheaper stuff, sometimes your build process is more difficult, and it has to do with just the overall quality, whether or not the part you got was good or not. And if you're building and you bought cheap parts and they just don't have as good a quality and the part you got was bad, you're going to think it's something you did when in fact you just got a bad part out of the box. Now that can happen to anybody at any time. So again, I'm talking statistically, it's less likely to happen if you buy quality parts. Now, when I say quality parts, I don't mean the most expensive parts. Don't misunderstand that. What I'm saying is not the cheapest parts, right? There are cheaper 780 Ti video cards, but none with the customer service and warranty, in my opinion, that compares with EVGA. Maybe, ASUS is good and Gigabyte is also good on their video cards. They're consistent across the board. But I prefer on the video card EVGA. And EVGA has this ACX cooler, which is already on, you don't have to do anything, and it's an awesome cooler for the video card, and it's another reason for selecting the EVGA product. Now, that all said, let me take this off for a minute because this looks ridiculous. I want to, further emphasize that when you build a computer, one of the other questions people ask is it cheaper to build your own computer? Yes, if you're building something that's exactly spec for spec, the same as a name brand pre-built computer, yours is going to be cheaper. Think about it. They've got all the overhead of the assembly line, the warehouse, the distribution. If you're buying your parts from a large distributor like Newegg, Amazon, Tiger Direct, etc., or whoever the big distributor is in your country, you're paying the lowest possible price for those parts. Now, even though the big name brand manufacturers may be paying a little bit less, they're not paying that much less. And you can do it yourself. The more expensive the machine is that you're building, the more money you save, generally speaking. So on a workstation computer, the savings isn't as great, but you also don't have the issues that come along with the name brand computer, like, calling support and having to deal with somebody who you can't understand on the other end of the phone. That's very frustrating when you're already frustrated to begin with, which is why you made the call. It's not anybody's fault. It's just that's the way the system's set up. And if you're not accustomed to hearing that, some folks have a thicker accent than other folks. I was brought up, accents are funny because nobody thinks they have an accent. They think everybody else does. So for example, if you're watching me in Australia, you may think I have an American accent, and I don't think I have an accent at all. Now, if I talk to somebody from New York, I think they have an accent. If I talk to somebody from Georgia, and they have that southern drawl, or Louisiana, or Minnesota, or Canada, I hear an accent. I'm from Michigan and Detroit specifically, and there is no, The accent I have is typically what's heard on American television. It's a neutral, but again, this is all psychological because I had a little debate with a friend from Australia once, and she says I have the accent, she doesn't, and I said, tell me there's a cherry tree in the Northern Territory, and she said, well, there's a cherry tree in the Northern Territory, and I said, you just said the word tree 2 times. You have an accent. So I was a little amused by that. But anyway, if you're not accustomed to a specific type of accent and you're calling them for support, it can be very difficult to understand them. Obviously, I watch a lot of, another example, I watch a lot of British television. So I have a pretty easy time understanding the British accent. And I have other American friends that are like, you understood that? But it's because I hear it all the time. Now, if you're calling support once a year and you're talking to somebody in another country speaking with an accent that you're not familiar with, it can be very difficult to understand them. And the reason I'm being so sensitive on this issue is I don't want to insult those folks out there doing that support. It's not an easy job to do. And their cultures in those countries are different than the cultures, at least here in America. And customer service is a real big thing here. And in general, like in places like India, customer service, it doesn't exactly work the same. Going to a bank and for example, to make a deposit, you might expect a certain amount of decorum and respect that my understanding is doesn't quite exist the same way in places like India, where it's more like it's a privilege for you to be able to use their service. But I digress on this because it's just through what I've read. I've never been there and experienced it myself, but I've seen some documentaries on support centers in India and some of the frustrations they have dealing with Americans. So, there's 2 sides to the coin. So, again, the benefit of building it yourself is the only person you need to call is you. You're the one who built it. You're the one who can fix it. You can use Google. You don't need to email me and ask me for help. You can find it on your own. You can think on your own. That's what I want to do in these videos. Now, what are the parts we're using? Let's talk about it. First of all, we've got the Cooler Master Storm. Is it a Storm? Yeah, the CM Storm Scout 2, which is going to be a great gaming case. Sometimes people ask, oh, I just spit all over everything. Sometimes people ask, hey, I want to build a gaming computer. I have $800. Can you recommend parts? No. There's a process where I need to talk to you for about 2 hours at least to determine what parts I can even start to recommend. There's so much personality that has to be discovered about you and what your budget is and what your needs, wants, and desires are with regards to your computer, that there's no generic, if that's your attitude, just go buy something pre-made. This is custom designed for the personality of the person that it's being sent to. And we talked about cases for a solid 2 weeks. So just to come up with this case, we went through, 2-3 dozen different cases. And I explained to him the shortcomings, in my opinion, of certain cases, what to look for. Briefly, I look for USB 3 up front. I look for no case door. This customer wanted a case window, and some customers care about size of the case. Some customers care about the color of the case. Some customers care about lights. Some customers care about upgradability, to be able to add a water cooler in the future, or add several video cards. All these things have to be taken under consideration just for that one part. And it wasn't until we selected this case that we could even begin to start talking about all these other parts. And as you can imagine, that is a very long phone call, or it's a lot of emails back and forth. Emails take forever. If it's 2 hours on the phone, imagine what that's like through email. So I have a process for that. It's called Can You Build a Computer for Me? And it details what the process is. But that just gives you a little taste of it. Just this one part was 2 or 3 weeks going back and forth. And what about this case? What about that case? Et cetera, et cetera. What do you recommend? Okay, didn't like what I was recommending. or some of the cases weren't even available anymore that I liked, that he also liked. And then this one came up and I looked at it and I said, yeah, this one should work good. Now, I've never worked with this case before, but doing the research, which by the way, you can do your own research too. Those product overviews that Newegg and Linus Tech Tips do are great to give you an idea of what you're going to get before you buy. Okay, so what I'm doing isn't a product overview. What I'm doing is an actual review. I have nobody to worry about upsetting as far as Cooler Master. If there's something about their case I don't like, they're not paying me to talk about it. So I am free to express my opinion. And that's exactly what it is. It's my opinion. It may not necessarily be factual. It's my opinion. So I want to clarify that in case anybody thinks I'm going to be able to get sued or something. That's ridiculous. For the power supply, we've got a CORSAIR HX750. It's a modular power supply. That's right there. We'll get that out of the way. We're going to work our way backwards here. We got a 1 terabyte Samsung Evo solid state drive and a LITE-ON brand optical DVD CD reader writer. Any of the parts, this will address another question. People say, well, do you recommend the Samsung Evo drive or do you recommend the CORSAIR power supply? Any parts that you see in my videos are parts I recommend by default unless I say otherwise in the video. So if you see me using, for example, the motherboard here is a Gigabyte Gaming GT. It's the Z97X Gaming GT. Some people say, well, why would you use this is the thing that I have to deal with. And if you're planning to do what I'm doing, then you better plan on dealing with this too. Some people have a very tunnel vision-esque view of the world in that they only can understand what their wants, needs, and desires are. They don't understand what they don't have consideration for other people. So they'll say, well, why would you use that board if you're not going to overclock it? Because I don't support overclocking. But that doesn't mean my customer can't overclock. It means if he does, don't call me when you have problems. That's part of the process of overclocking, is you're taking on that risk and you're taking on that frustration when things don't work to figure it out yourself. That is your own journey, and if you want to go on that journey, you go on that by yourself or with some of your friends. I don't have time for that journey. So it's always up to the customer to decide how they want to use the computer. But there's more to this chipset than just overclocking ability. Even if you pair the Z97 chipset with a non-K processor, there are other future-proofing benefits to this chipset. And they're slipping my mind right now. I know SATA Express, I believe, is one of them. There's a few other technologies that aren't quite available or not available cheaply or widely available that will probably be available in the future that this motherboard is going to be ready for, that have nothing to do with overclocking. So when somebody says the only point of a Z97 is overclocking, they're not considering all the other possibilities of what other people might need. They're only considering their own needs when they ask that question. So I find that a little frustrating. We're not building a computer for you. We're building a computer for this customer, and I'm simply sharing with you his build, and through his generosity of giving me the time to do this. This takes 2 to 3 weeks to film, and that delays him getting his computer for 2 to 3 weeks. Someone might say, well, I would have used this video card, or I would have used that processor. Well, when you build your computer, you can use any video card and any processor you want. I don't have to support it. I don't care. Good for you. So that just kind of amuses me sometimes, and I'm sure now I'll see comments. I would have used this case. I would have used that video card. I would have used this power supply. Well, good for you. I didn't ask. All right. So anyway, on the CPU, speaking of that, we've got a 4 gigahertz i7 4790K. This is a K processor. We've got Windows 7 64-bit home. We've got 16 gigs of G.SKILL RAM. That's DDR 1600. The GeForce GTX 780 Ti with the ACX cooler from EVGA. I think that about wraps it up, other than Stewie. Stewie's just here for moral support.
Mark my words, when you least expect it, your ovens will
Oh, thank you for the support, Stewie. I'm going to just set you over here, if that's okay. Is that all right?
Your mother, I come bearing a gift. I'll give you a hint. It's in my diaper, and it's not a toaster.
Okay, I'm not your mother.
No, I'm going to crack double for you tonight.
I don't understand that.
Unhand me, woman, I don't have gas. I'm in love. Well then, I guess it's both.
Okay, all right, we're just going to put you right there.
You shall rue this day. But go on, stop ruing.
All right, I'm ruing. All right. I have no idea how this is going to work. But nothing ventured, nothing gained. Wish me luck. Here we go. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is move these parts off to the side. Things like the windows and the video card, the processor. I'm going to set all that back over here because we want to clear the work area out and have as much room to work as possible. CPU cooler can go back there as well. I don't think I mentioned that, the Hyper 212 cooler, but I'm sure you saw it. And the first parts we're going to put in are the power supply and the drives. And the first thing we have to do is prep the case. So these are the instructions for the case, which we'll just send that way. And you know, there's some question as to why I peel this stuff off and not leave it on for the customer to do it. I like my systems to be plug and play. I want the customer to be able to take the machine and unbox it, plug it in, and start using it. That's why I do that. All right, sorry about that. I had to cut and check the video. I think it's going to work okay, and I've changed the direction now, so you're facing, you're seeing the oven in the normal view you normally get to see. And I'll try not to move too quickly. I hope nobody gets any motion sickness from this, but if you play first-person shooters, if you're building a gaming machine like this, then you should be used to the motion. But either way, it should be a unique video. Like I said, I'll do my best to try and keep things steady. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the screws from the case. So we got 4 screws here. I'll make sure to put a description of this screwdriver in the notes. This has just been a fantastic electric screwdriver, absolutely. Is it wrong for a man to love a screwdriver? If so, I'm guilty. All right, so let's go ahead and pull these panels off here. There's one. Now you want to set these panels aside. I like to put them right down there like so. We'll grab the windowed panel, and I'm going to pull that plastic off. Oh look, they even give you a little tab right there. Pull that off. Throw that in the trash. And we'll set this one over here. Generally, I put, when I line the cases up like that, the panels, this one's going to go on first. And I want to protect that window, so generally that's the way I set them for that reason. Or you can put them back in the box the computer came in, or the case came in, I mean. All right. We got a wire tie here that we can take off. And these are all of our front port umbilicals, which I'm going to just pull out. Oh, another wire tie. There's wire inside of here. And you don't want to leave these on a working computer because if the wire gets exposed, it could short some things out. These are fans that are already hooked up, and these look like some additional fans right here. Actually, I have to look into that because this may be lighting. I'll find out. It looks like it's just lighting. There's only 2 wires, and you'll see the fans have 3 or 4 wires. These actually have 3. This has got to be for LEDs. That's what that is. And notice the connectors are even different than a fan connector. That's got to be LEDs. I've never worked with this case before, so let's see how it goes. I'm going to turn it around rather. Should have picked up a Lazy Susan, you know those things that rotate? I'll put it on my to-do list. This is our the screws and numerous other miscellaneous parts that are required for this case, like drive rails that we're holding. See, the box has holes in it like a hard drive, and they just put it in there for shipping reasons to keep it in place. So let's open this up and let's get what we've got in here out of here. Let's see what we've got. Lots of drive rails. That's good. How many drive rails do we have? There's one set, two sets, 3, 4, 5. So apparently you can put 5 hard drives in there from the count. And then 2 more on top of that. That's 7. How many bays do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There you go. I guess that's 7. So this box will go to the recycle bin. And we've got some zip ties, brass standoffs, a speaker, a lock, if it's unusual to see a lock nowadays, to keep people out of the computer when it's used typically in an office environment. We used to have a problem with employees stealing memory out of computers back in the day when memory was really expensive, and we used to have to put locks. And then we eventually went to specialized screws that required a special screwdriver to remove. Now, one of the first places we can start is one of the easiest things to do is install the optical drive. And you can see these 5.5-inch bays here, or 5.25-inch bays, have a kind of a cool locking mechanism, which is similar but different to other cases I've worked on. So I'm going to use the top one as I always do. Let's lock on that side, open on that side. And I've got to pull this cover out, which I'm guessing, oh look, we have another piece of plastic here that can be removed. Let's take that off of there. All right. I'm guessing you can just pop the panel. Yeah, panel just comes off. And we got a little piece of packing styrofoam in there. Let's get rid of that. See, that goes in the garbage. I don't, heaven forbid I threw that on the floor. Actually, I don't want my dog to eat it. And by pushing in these tabs, you just have to release one side, and then the other piece should come out. If not, there we go. And then we'll save that, just in case the client wants to put it back in at some point in the future. And it's plastic, which can be easily broken. I prefer the metal connectors on some of the other cases, but what happens in Phoenix is plastic will dry up pretty bad and start to crack. So we'll see how this case holds up over time. You know, it's one thing to review a product that you've had for a couple weeks, but when you build a computer for somebody else, or especially for somebody else, regardless of the warranty, you own that computer for the rest of your life. You're responsible for it. The customer will always call you when they have a problem, and if you fail to respond, they won't call you ever again. You're probably not going to sell them another computer. So it's really important that the parts I select and recommend for my customers are ones that aren't going to kill me in support costs or make me look bad. And that's why I won't build certain computer products. If somebody says, I want this, I want that, will you build it? And I say no, it's because it's going to make me look bad, or statistically speaking, I'm not willing to put that risk in. So it's just a little different from a typical reviewer who just has a product for a couple of weeks. So I'll talk more about that in another video, but we've got a place here for a screw, because you can see the drive moves around a little bit. And this is going to be shipped to Chicago. So Phoenix to Chicago is a long way. I want to make sure that that drive doesn't break free in shipping. So I'm going to reach in this bag. Let's take out these zip ties. Let's see what we got in here. Let's get rid of that and that. And that's probably for a fan or a radiator or something. And I need these fine, thin threaded screws. Oh, this is nice. I do like it when case manufacturers give you a socket for the standoffs, and then you can use a regular number 2 Phillips, which is what you'll be using for all these screws. So you don't need to have a special socket. That's a nice touch. I like that. We won't be using that. And this is our speaker. We'll set that aside. All of our standoffs. Sorry, see, this is this is my OCD here. I've got to separate things. All right, so there's all our standoffs right there. And then the case screws are going to be these hex head screws. What I'm looking for is a thin thread screw, which is right here, or fine thread is actually what it's called. Typically has a rounded head instead of a hex head. They, again, still use a number 2 screwdriver. And I'm going to just put that in right here. It actually looks like the screw hits the bottom of the latch, which is interesting. I'm thinking I really don't want to put a screw there. I don't like how that goes up against that plastic. So I think what I'll do instead is come around to the other side and put one right here instead. And one is really all we need, and that's a good thing because that's really all they're giving us. If you look closely, there's a little arrow right there pointing to where a screw can go, but as you can see, the drive is in place. However, it's a little crooked, so I'm going to take this, I'm going to back the screw out. I want to just kind of push in on it. That's a lot better. Something as simple as, as that, you'd be surprised how many people can't be bothered, and that's just a demonstration of the quality of their workmanship. You know, for me, those little details matter. So here we've got our 1 terabyte Samsung solid state drive. Once you guys go to a solid state drive, you never want to go back to a regular hard drive. They are so fast. It's amazing, and it can make the difference on a slow computer to a fast computer just by changing your drive to a solid state drive. Assuming you have a SATA 3, which is 6 gigabits per second controller, and if you don't, you can always add one. And they've given us these trays. See, these aren't going to work for this. So that ain't going to happen. That's for a traditional hard drive. So we're going to use one of these trays. They're both the same. It doesn't matter which one we use. And we're going to put the drive in this direction because we want our cabling to face the back. And these holes should line up. And they do. And we're going to use the same fine thread screw. And as I mentioned in other videos, this screwdriver does have a clutch on it that stops it from over-torquing the screws. And I don't want to tighten them all the way down just yet because I want to be able to wiggle the drive a little bit to make sure that none of the screws go in crooked. If you're building a computer for the first time and you don't know if you're going to be building a lot of them, just use a regular manual screwdriver. But when you build as many as I do, this really helps to prevent things like carpal tunnel syndrome and other repetitive stress related problems that could happen. And it assures all the screws are tightened to the same specification, which carryovers from my automotive days. It really doesn't matter on a computer, but that's my OCD for you. All right, so you see that just went in real easy, right? Simple. Locks in place. Now, we don't have to worry about putting a screw in and locking this in position because once we put the panels back on, if this were to break free in shipping, even if it went forward, it would hit this panel, and if it went backward, it would hit this panel. So there's no way it would ever come loose and start bouncing around in this area. And I've seen that happen where a hard drive is broken loose in shipping and it's destroyed everything in this area. So the CPU heatsink, even ripped the CPU from the socket, busted the memory right out of the sockets. So this does not need to be secured like I secured the optical drive up here for that reason. No matter how harshly this may be handled in shipping, this isn't going anywhere. It could maybe move an inch this way or an inch the other way, and that's not enough to get it out of there. So I also like that Samsung did not put an anti-static bag around that, which I think is great. I'm going to set this over on the table. Sorry for that movement there. I'm going to try and this is weird because I really have no idea what this is filming right now, and what a shame if I get this far and find out it wasn't caught on camera. So hopefully it's capturing everything. Now we've got the power supply here. This is the modular HX750 from CORSAIR. And again, all of these parts are paid for by the customer. So again, if I was to be sent a power supply from CORSAIR and I didn't like it, I wouldn't be as upset as I would be if I spent my own hard-earned money to acquire it. if you know what I mean. Like if you spend your money to buy the part, and the part doesn't live up to its marketing and hype, you're going to be much more upset than a reviewer who got it for free, who had it for 2 weeks or whatever, had it for a few weeks, and then sent it back regardless if they liked it or not. Oh no! Corsair's pulling a Seasonic on us here with the velvet bag. Oh my gosh, every computer needs a velvet bag. Yes, because, well, you could store your cables in there, except that's what they give you here, is a place for your cables. And I guess you put this bag in this bag, and then you can put this bag in the box, then you can put the box in another bag, and then you can put that bag in a bigger box. I really don't get this. I don't understand the velvet bag. You know what? Keep your velvet bag and take $2 off the power supply. How about that? That's what I'd like. All right, that's all we need from there. That's all we need from there. Set that there. Look at that, came with power cord. And you'll see this power supply is a bit longer than others. Let's see, we've got a warning. Silent operation at low to moderate loads. In this mode, the fan will not spin. What's it covering? All right, it's just telling you if your fan doesn't spin, don't freak out. We've got a little piece of plastic right here. We'll peel that off. That's not entirely necessary, but it's really just put there for shipping. And then this power supply is going to go with the cable up against the motherboard tray. So if you're wondering which way does it go in, cables go up against the motherboard tray, so that way they can go right out through these holes to make your cabling look clean. That's pretty much with every power supply. The cables never come out of the middle, come out of one side. When you put it in this direction, this fan is an intake fan. It's going to suck air in from down here. There is a filter. I can already see it down here on this case that you can remove to clean. There's not a whole lot of clearance. You know, I can barely get my fingers under there. So if you put this computer on carpeting, you've got yourself a vacuum cleaner that's going to overheat. So keep that in mind if you go with this case. So far, I'm liking this case so far. I like the rounded edges. It looks pretty easy to work on. But let's just see. Let's just see. So what I'm going to do is remove this wire tie, and what do we have here? Silica gel, do not eat, throw away, desiccant. So you sent me something to throw away, like this. Why doesn't this say throw away? Why doesn't this say do not eat? Can I eat this? I'm hungry. They need a drive-through PC hardware shop so I can, you know, get it in the car and eat it on the way home. I really don't understand why just this is labeled as do not eat. But I digress. All right, I'll be cooking this thing up later. Let's go ahead and just set that in. Now this power supply, kind of felt like it had rubber feet on it. Oh, the rubber feet are in the case. That's what I was feeling. Okay, there's rubber feet right there. I'm going to set it down, and it's going to lodge under that. Spin the case right here. Bring it around. We want to make sure we get these holes lined up, and we're going to use the hex head screws that are the wider thread. And we just want to. Whoop. I'll get that later. We're just gonna put one right here, and we're gonna put one right here. It's gonna be one in each corner, right? Except one corner is offset. And you'll see there's an offset one here. That's so you can flip the power supply around the other way. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but that goes to pretty good engineering on the part of the case designers to give you that option. And then I'm just going to tighten these down a little bit more than the standard because it's a heavy power supply. Again, it's being shipped a couple thousand miles. I want to make sure that it doesn't break free. If this power supply breaks free in shipping, this system's going to be toast. Okay, I need to put an edit in here because I need to see what I filmed so far before I go any further, because what we've got to do next is prep the motherboard for installation. And again, I have no idea. I mean, for all I know, this thing's filming down my shirt. So let me check what I've got. I'm trying to put as few edits in this as possible, but aside from angles changing, I'm not touching the computer except when the camera's on as far as any work's being done. So every detail of the build will be shown in this video. I won't be editing any steps out whatsoever. Okay, but I didn't want to put any edits in it at all, but because I don't have a cameraman and because I can't monitor what I'm filming, I just need to stop and check, because if I have to refilm any of this, I'm not too far along yet. This is a new experience for me here, and hopefully in the end it'll be worth it. All right, so here's our edit. Okay, so I've checked the video. It looks like the camera wasn't quite pointed down far enough, but I think you got the gist of it, and hopefully I've got it pointed down enough now. I'm going to go ahead and set a lot of this stuff aside right now. Just move that way. And move all this over here. All these zip ties, these will go, and these will go over here where I just ultimately keep all the manuals and everything just right here. And let me grab the motherboard, CPU, and memory, which is what we need next. So here's our memory, our CPU, our board. And then we're going to need the Hyper 212 as well. So hopefully this is going to capture this well. And hopefully I can fix the yellow tint in editing. You guys might be getting an early look at this, some of you, before those corrections are done. I haven't decided how I'm going to break this video up yet. So here's our Z97X Gaming GT from Gigabyte. Window in there, and we'll just set that right there. And open this up, remove this plastic cover, and this, I've worked with this motherboard already. I really like it. Inside we've got the bridges for let's see, this looks like 1, 2, 3 video cards, 1, 2, 3, 4 video cards. SATA cables, there's 2 pairs. We've got some stickers that make it go faster. Oh, and there's our, for hooking up 2 video cards, there's our bridge. This is NVIDIA, this is Crossfire, I see. And instruction manual with the driver, disk, and multilingual installation book. All right, we'll just set those. I'm going to put them in here. This is the I/O shield. We can go ahead and put this in now. I'm going to need a pair of scissors to open that, so we'll go right over here and grab the scissors. That's going to go. Oh, I like this shield with the foam, the foil backing on it. I like that. I also like that it's black. It's going to match the case. These are the small holes like this. This is your speakers, and this is your keyboard and mouse. There's a picture of a keyboard and mouse. It's going to go in like that, but from inside, whoops. You can say I can just do this from feel. I don't have to actually look at it. You can feel when it goes into place. You can physically see when it pops in. Like so. And we'll get back to our board here. Let's go ahead and take our board out. I'm going to pick it up by this heatsink right here. It's a good time to touch something metal. This is where your anti-static precautions need to be in effect, which is you don't want to touch any of the metal points. Touch nothing metal except the heat sinks. Some of the boards have plastic over the heat sinks. ASUS likes to do that, so make sure that you check for any removable plastic. This board doesn't seem to have that. Now, to install our CPU, that'll be the first thing we're going to do is put the CPU in. You're going to take this lever. I hope this camera's showing us. Maybe I should just push it away from me a little bit. We're going to push this lever down and away, and it's got a little springiness to it. And we're going to lift that up, and you'll see that whole piece lifts up. Okay, so if we turn this around. Now, the reason there's a cover here is these are very delicate pins. Don't touch these. Don't drop anything in there, whatever you do. And we've got our processor right here, our Core i7-4790K. Intel owns McAfee, and that's why you're starting to see the McAfee name and advertising with the processor. Eventually, I believe Intel's going to drop the McAfee name over time, but I don't really know that for sure. So let's get everything out of there. So this is the advertising for McAfee. I don't know why this instruction manual is so thick. I've never read one of these. It's got a 3-year warranty, blah, blah, blah. It's got a Core i7 sticker. Everybody wants you to put stickers on your computer because the pop-ups and the spyware isn't enough advertising. So we're going to go ahead and remove this heatsink, and we're not going to put this heatsink on. So we're just going to set it aside for right now. And in order to get this out, I'm going to just lift up on this cardboard, and that just pops up. And the CPU is right there. We can fold that back. We can put this back in. If you are going to use the stock heatsink, it's fine unless you're overclocking or you want a quieter computer. It already has the thermal paste on it. That's what the cover's on. It's to prevent contamination on the thermal paste. And this will go back to the customer in case they want to use it or give it to a friend or keep it as a backup, whatever. Okay, so we're done with that. Now the CPU only goes in one way. You'll see that one of the lips of one of the corners here has a lip on it. It's been cut. You can get your finger under there and lift up. Try not to touch the surface of the CPU because that's where your thermal compound is going to go, and you want this to be free of any contamination that could hinder the performance of the thermal compound. There's a groove cut out here and a groove cut out there. I don't know how well that camera is going to pick that up. And on the socket itself, there's a notch here and a notch there. And all I'm going to do is, it's only going to go in one way. It's only going to line up with the notches one way. And I'm just going to lightly set it into position. I don't put any pressure down on it. I can grab the edges and try and wiggle it. It doesn't wiggle, so I know it's seated correctly. Then the lid is going to come down, and it's going to go underneath this this screw right here. So it kind of looks like a little forklift, in my opinion. That's going to go underneath that screw, and now this is going to have a lot more tension on it. And as I push down on this lever, in most cases that plastic part's going to pop up on its own. Let's see what happens. Let's push down on it, and then put it under there. It's slightly popped up. It didn't come up all the way, but there's a little lip. You can lift it up. And it's important you hold on to this. I've said it numerous times in other videos. However, if this is the first video of mine you're seeing, this cover must be in place if the CPU is ever removed. And it tells you right here, install processor first, then remove cover, or remove and keep the cover. If you have to send this board in for an RMA for repair, and you do not ship it back with this cover on it, they will not honor your warranty. Unless you ship it back with the CPU, which is not recommended. So we'll keep that in the box. Now the next thing we can put in is the memory. And on this board you'll see right here it says DDR3.1, DDR3.3, DDR3.2, DDR3.4. On motherboards you want to use traditionally 1 and 2 first. That's going to be the gray ones in this case. Now some motherboards have these retentions, these moving retention levers on both sides, and I'm seeing more and more where the retention levers only move on one side, not the other, and that's the case with this board. These do not move, only these do. Now here's our memory. This is a DDR3 1600. It's 16 gigs, so it's 2 sticks of 8. We'll open that up. Now this memory has a heat shield on it, and it's okay to grab the memory anywhere along the heat shield. Okay, so anywhere along here is safe to hold it. It's got a notch. It can only go in one way. And I'm going to put one side in first. Make sure it's seated fully in the track and lined up, and then I use thumbs, go one side in, then the other, and you should hear it click into position. That's 8 gigs of RAM installed. We have a sticker, because that's what we need, another sticker. And once again, line it up. Only goes in one way. This is pretty hard to screw up, to be honest. Probably the only area you could really screw this up would be not putting enough pressure on it. You'll see what they call the gold fingers right along here. I'm not touching them. You don't want to touch those. But when I push this in, they should virtually disappear into that socket. So you can't see those little gold fingers. Well, you can barely see them. But that's in. And that takes care of our memory and our CPU. Now, the CPU cooler. Got the Hyper 212 Evo, which, again, I want to try and make sure I'm capturing as much of this on this GoPro as possible. We're going to go ahead and pull that out. Wait a minute, what's this? Silica gel. Throw away, do not eat. I threw it. Okay. We've got our thermal compound, a little bag of parts here. You know what, let's just go ahead and stick that stuff in there. Let's see what we got in here. Now, this bag says it's for Intel LGA 2011. We won't be using that. We've got a very similar socket for these larger style, basically they're standoffs, just like the motherboard standoffs, much larger. But I like it that they give you the socket so you can use a regular Phillips screwdriver. You don't have to buy a special tool or use a pair of pliers, which would be the wrong tool for the job. We've got some rubber pads. Those rubber pads are for use if you want to add a second fan, what they call a push-pull design. You'll see that if I pull this off, the fan that's on there now, see the little rubber pads? They're right here in each corner. So if you were to get another one, you would use these right here along with these, and you'd put it on your fan, and then you'd put the fan on one side, and then it would just click into place like so. Now we want this fan to blow out in this direction, so we want to mount it in this direction like so. Okay, so I'm not actually touching the heatsink right now. There is a piece of tape right here that tells you to leave this on to keep it free of contamination until you're ready to mount this. And we're not ready to mount it yet, so we'll set it down. We aren't going to be using any of these, so those can go in there. And these screws we won't be using, so they can also go in the box. We've got a back plate, and we've got our instructions, lots of instructions. And if you haven't installed one of these before, I'd recommend you read them, because the reason, if you notice there's a protective material here to keep the metal from touching the metal against the back of the board. And on AMD CPUs, you'll actually use these holes where it mounts against the back of the board this way. And on Intel CPUs, you use this side. Basically, it's going to be the only way you can mount it, so don't worry about that. Don't be afraid. If you put it on backwards, what's going to happen is you're going to bend. When you put these standoffs in and they tighten down, they're going to bend these up, and it could short out against the motherboard when you're using it with an Intel CPU. So I hope the camera caught that. What I'm referring to are these. So they want to be flush against the board. And on an AMD, you want to be flush against the board with the 4 screws here. Or sometimes it's just 2 screws. It depends on the board. And then you'll see there's 3 holes here that often line up, on some boards anyway, with the socket. See how there's 2 and then the 3rd one there? See how that should match it? Rocket science, right? The problem is, if I put it in this direction, you see how I'm going to bend? When I tighten this down, I'm going to bend these. So this has to go on this way. This would be the proper direction. And what I'm going to do is hold that with one hand, and look at how I'm holding the board. I'm not touching anything metal. Fingers are on plastic. I'm holding the edge. My other hand is just holding that back plate into position. I'm going to grab one of these standoffs and I'm going to put it through the hole here. And I'm just going to put that in like that. This gets a little bit tricky. You almost need 3 hands. And at least with the GoPro, I don't have to hold the camera with a 4th hand. All I want to do is just get this started. The first one's the toughest one. All I can tell you is take your time and enjoy the build process. You know, it's like I've said before, it's kind of like adult Lego. You don't rush through building your Lego. The building it is the fun part. So all I want to do is get that started, which is what I've done. And I want to go to the opposite corner, do the exact same thing. Now, my hand has just made contact with the back of the board, and I'm sure that hasn't caused any damage, but you really want to avoid that as much as possible. If you start feeling the back of the board, you know, don't worry, did I just static shock it or anything like that. I think you're probably going to be okay if you're working in a static-free environment, and the only way you're really going to know if you caused any damage is to turn it on and use it. So I think a lot of people make a bigger deal of static discharge than what it really is in reality today, and they're carrying over the fears of electronics from way back in the day when there were a lot more parts that were used. Today, there's nowhere near the number of components on a motherboard that a motherboard used to have, and motherboard used to be so much larger than this. And so when the parts are mounted in a circuit board, they're much less prone to a static discharge because the grounding circuits on the board are in place. But when they're placing the actual parts on the board, like this chip or that chip or that chip, that's where they're really prone to static. So in the factory, it's really important that they have electrostatic discharge precautions in place. Okay, so we've got the third one here. And again, we're just going to put this on it. You'll see I'm just not using any tools at this point, just my hands. And we just want to make sure all 4 of these get started. You see, I kind of have to wiggle that a little bit. Wiggle it a little bit. There it is. See how I'm holding it? See how I'm not touching you. Touching nothing metal. That's pretty good. And then we want to tighten these down, and the way we're going to tighten them down is we're going to take this socket that they included, place it here. I'm going to grab my regular screwdriver, which I have in the drawer right here. Oh, still have my HP bit on there. That's not what I want. This is actually a Phillips number 1, and this is actually too small. That's why it's important to use a Phillips number 2. This isn't going to bite in very well. See how it's... I always want to use a number 2 Phillips, or you'll strip those out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steal this bit right here. Since I didn't plan that out very well, did I? That's okay, this will work. We'll put that bit on there. It's more than I need, but it'll do the job. And we want to tighten these down. Now I can feel that it's just spinning. So I need something to hold that in place. Be gentle with it. Don't force anything. Now this one, no, that one's spinning too. And that one's spinning. All right, well, apparently you need 2 sockets to hold that. No, wait a minute. I might have spoke too soon. That one's actually letting me tighten it. And this one isn't. Go figure. So what I'm going to do is just the opposite. I'm going to try tightening it from this end. This should be the same size, and it is. And let's see if it'll let us tighten it from this direction. It still seems like, oh, you know what? It's tightening. I'm going to do opposite corners on this because I want to make sure that it's tightened equally in all sides. I don't want one side I don't want to warp it. My magnetic screwdriver isn't quite strong enough to hold that in place. So let me set that down and find my bit. There it is. Need some Dramamine? You okay? All right, let's keep going. So I need to just put this on with my hands. Where was I? I was up in this corner, right? It feels pretty good. This corner. Even this bit feels a little bit too small for that side. Even though this is a number 2 Phillips, it's still kind of slipping inside of the groove there. It is tightening. You don't want to crush the board, but you do want this to be pretty darn tight. And I just want to double check my work and make sure everything, sometimes when you tighten one corner, another corner loosens. So it's good to go around it at least twice and make sure it's a good firm fit. You don't want to hear a crunching sound. If you hear a crunching sound, you've tightened it too much. Yeah, that feels pretty good. And we're going to go right back up to this corner. In retrospect, I probably should have done this first before putting the memory in, and then I could have laid the board down flat, but I didn't think I'd have to tighten it from the bottom. But there you go. It's just another lesson learned in the process of building. Nothing that's major, not a big deal. Just working a little harder than we really need to. This one still felt a little bit loose to me. No? Okay. I'm actually going to check it a third time, which is overkill and unnecessary, but I can't help myself. Yeah, I'm happy with that now. All right, so our back plate is now in position. Everything looks good. Put these bits back in the screwdriver. And my 215 Torx can go back on there for the HP. We're done with this socket for now, but the owner may need it in the future for upgrades, or who knows what the future holds, has in store. And then I'm going to put that back up. Okay. Now, the way that this works is you have this piece here is kind of like a scissors, and it moves like that because there are different CPU sockets that this fits in. And you want to go lengthwise, and you'll see on the bottom there's a pin, springy pin here. And this doesn't tighten or anything, it moves up and down. It doesn't really do anything except hold it into position. So if you look on this heatsink, there's a hole here and a pin sticking up. And what we want to do is put this in so that the nub goes into that hole, right, like so. And then we can kind of spread it open a little bit here. And if I have it in the right way, that little pin will also help to hold it into position. Yeah, just like that. So now we're going to mount this in this direction. This fan is going to we're going to mount it in this direction.
this fan is going to get in the way, so I need to take the fan off. So again, I'm just going to pull up on one side of these plastic notches. We're going to pull the fan off. Remember which, well, I guess it doesn't matter which side the fan came off. You could, in theory, you could mount it this way or this way. Just make sure when you put the fan on, the fan's blowing in that direction. So I like to keep it the way it came out of the box. So what I'm going to do next is get this ready for mounting, which means getting the thermal compound out. And you've seen me use this technique before, and I'm going to use the same technique again. A lot of people don't like how I put thermal paste on, and yet in all the years I've been in business, it has never once been an issue. In fact, I've got a computer here that I'll be demonstrating that's 10 years old, and this is how I put thermal paste on. This is how I've learned to do it, because this is the only way I could find that can consistently ensure that the thermal paste, when it's pressed on, will spread, will cover the entire CPU, not just the middle. Now, some people say there's air bubbles, blah, blah, blah. It really doesn't affect. Again, I'd recommend you do your own testing. When I do my testing, people claim that I've manipulated the video. If I don't do my testing, then they claim that I'm making false claims, and they're too lazy to do their own testing. All I can tell you is this is actually how I build all my computers. This is the way it's been for years, and I'm still in business. So, you know, come to your own conclusions. Another quick edit here because I had to get my tape. You want to avoid touching the surface of the tape. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spread that little bead of thermal compound until it completely covers the CPU evenly. I don't want a glob of it anywhere, and I don't want any exposed metal on the top of the CPU. You want as thin of a layer as you can possibly make it. And again, when you place a bead of thermal compound and you place the CPU on top of it, you have no way of knowing how much of that CPU just got covered and how much of it is remaining bare. And then it's clean, right? You can just throw that in the trash. We're going to peel this off, and we're going to put this in, just like so. And I'm going to set it down on top, and I'm going to just open that up a little bit. And what I want to do is just get one screw started. And you know what? I think I'm going to use my manual screwdriver again. I put it away too soon. So let's get the manual screwdriver back out. And we just want to get one screw started. That's all I'm worried about right now. These screws do have little springs on them, so you have to kind of push down a little bit. And I want to make sure that the pin is sitting inside of the hole. Oop, so I didn't have that screwed down all the way. So try it again on the other side. Again, you really want to take your time with this. Don't rush it through. And little mistakes like that aren't going to hurt anything. This can move around on top of the CPU. It's fine. It's just moving that thermal compound around. And that one's in. Something's preventing me from... Oh, I see. That other screw didn't come out. It just... it's adding a lot of tension on it. These screws have little slots where they move forward and backward, and you have to adjust them. And as you put tension on it, I shouldn't have tightened two screws down on the same side because I'm making my life much more difficult. So I'm going to unscrew that. I did that because I thought the other side came loose. So I want to do the opposite corner is what I want. And that's going to require a little finesse. And you know, this cooler, it's amazing that they can make this one cooler work with so many different CPU sockets, and the way they do that is through these little notches here that the screws are in. And you have to adjust them to fit your socket. I just want to get it started. Okay. And then this one I can put back on. Again, just want to get it started. And then we're going to turn the motherboard around. We have one last one to do. You can see that in order for me to move this, I have to lift up on the screw, and then I can adjust it as needed. Make sure the screw is centered over the hole. Again, try to avoid touching any of the motherboard components. Try to avoid doing that. There's no circuitry right there, so you want to be careful. We don't want to scratch any of the traces on the board. And now I can tighten this one down, then go to the opposite corner. I can now tighten this one down. Go to the opposite corner, tighten this one down. And finally, the last corner, tighten this one down. Check it. You want to make sure it should be nice and even over the CPU. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good to me. And then I'm going to just double check them. That feels tight. Opposite corner. Opposite corner. Opposite corner. All right. Now remember, we want the fan blowing in this direction. We want the cable to come out of the bottom. We don't want the cable coming out of the top because that's going to look terrible, right? So with the cable coming out of the bottom, we're going to line up the groove. See this groove right here with this notch and the top of the fan. And hopefully our RAM isn't going to get in the way. Once again, upon retrospect, I probably should have done this first. It just needs to go a little bit lower. Actually, you know what? It's perfect. And then you just push in on it and the other side will click into place. That's not going anywhere. And then I'm going to mostly handle the motherboard now by this large heatsink. And on the motherboard, there's going to be a place for this to plug in. It's going to say CPU fan on it. And it's somewhere around here. There it is. Right there it says CPU fan. And we're going to take that cable and we can wind it underneath. We can actually grab a wire tie and clean that up. That's going to plug in just like that. The motherboard's prepped and now it's ready to be installed in our case. So here's a point where I'm going to take another edit, make sure we got everything, and continue on from there. Okay, that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to take all this other stuff that we got from other parts, and we're just going to put that in the motherboard box for now, including the cables. Just trying to keep my work area clean. I also have the instructions for the solid state drive. In the driver, there's a driver disk. It's not a driver, it's the Samsung Magician software, which is going to be an old version that I'll have to download. I don't know, I guess I need to keep that because there's a big hole. If I don't put this on here and I kind of defeats the purpose of having a box if it's got a big hole in it and you tip it, everything's going to fall out. In fact, you know what else I'm going to put in here is the case screws so I don't lose them. So let's throw those in there as well. And then let's get this out of our way. Very important that we have a nice clean work area. Oh, you can see my camera over there. How cool. Camera filming a camera. What a concept. No one's ever done that before. Actually, all these drive rails could have gone in the box. Zip ties we're going to use a little bit later. And I think what I'm going to do is come around the other side of the table. Whoa. Are you okay? Okay. Don't get nauseous. And actually, I guess I need one of those zip ties now, don't I? We'll grab one of these. Let's just wire tie this up nice and neat. Something like that might look good. I don't know. What do you think? I think that looks pretty good. Instinctively I wanted to tear that little tag off, but it says warranty void if removed on the little tag on the wire, so I guess I better leave it on there. I'm going to just kind of tighten it down a little bit, line this up the way I want it. This is the tag I'm talking about. Void if removed. And all I want to do is make sure that's lined up, tighten it down, grab another zip tie, do the other side. There's no right or wrong way to cable tie anything, it's just, but it looks good to you, you know. Every case design and parts are different, which cables you're going to be using on a power supply, how long the cables on the power supply are, how big your computer case is, are all factors in determining how you're going to clean up your wiring. But now's the best time to at least get that CPU fan cabled in nice and neat before we get it mounted up. And that sound you're hearing are my refrigerators. It's a hot Arizona summer. Well, the end of summer, it's what we call monsoon season. It's very humid and miserable out here right now. And my air conditioners, my refrigerators, they're all working overtime. Alright, so we just cut the pigtails off of there. Now we're ready to mount into the case. So we're going to need this. And set all this aside. Now, which screw goes into the standoffs? In some cases, literally, some computer cases, well, looks like I wasn't recording. Okay, sorry about the audio there. I forgot to turn my other camera on. When it comes to deciding which screws you need to use on your standoff, some computer cases use the fine thread and some use the wider thread. It appears that these are going to use the wide thread, and they are. Now, how many do we need and how many holes do we have on the board? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 holes on the board. So we need, guess how many standoffs we need? We need 9, and that's exactly how many we have. That means we're going to need 9 of these screws. I hope they gave us 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Everything else, you can go over there. 9 standoffs, 9 screws, 9 holes. Take the case and lay it down. I want this out of my way. In fact, I'm going to take the twist tie off of this so that the cable doesn't get in our way. So we're going to take this off and bring it up here like this. Now I know from experience we're going to use this top hole here and this top hole here. It almost feels like these cables are going to get in our way. There's another wire tie, that's why. All these wire ties have to come out. I can't emphasize that enough. Do not reuse them. replace them with nylon zip ties. It's fine for them to ship it with that, but you don't want wires, anything with metal, inside of your computer case. Now, I'm guessing that this has to go in these holes here. So we're going to fill up all 3 holes along the top, starting from this edge. And they're all in a straight line. That much I know on this board. They're all in a straight line. So like this one down here, there's not a 3rd hole, so I know not to use this one because I know there's 3 in a row, and there's not 3 in a row here. We run into the grommet. So that's what I'm using as my guide. And then the same thing on the very bottom. And I can only tighten these so far with my fingers. On some cases, it's a little easier than on other cases. And I just spit again. Isn't that pleasant? All right, let's go here. Let's go there. All you want to do is get them started. Like I said, they gave us this socket that we can use to tighten these down with a regular screwdriver. And I'm not actually going to use this because I like the tool I have better. And what I have is I come around the counter is this tool right here, which is a 5mm ratcheting socket. Okay. And we are going to tighten these down with this tool. And don't tighten these too tight or you will strip them out, and there's nothing you can do at that point because the motherboard tray is riveted to the case. You can't replace the motherboard tray. It'll just spin and spin and spin forever. Make them snug. That's all you want to do. Make them snug. At this point, it doesn't matter what order you tighten them in. Just make sure you get all 9. Count them off if you have to. We're on number 4, right, where you did the 3 in the middle. This is number 5. What number is this? It's number 6. That's right, boys and girls. Condescending means you talk down to people. All right, sorry, that was condescending. Let's do these last 3. And you don't want to tighten them all the way down anyway because we need to do what I call a dry fit just to make sure they're all lined up. You want to make sure that you don't have a standoff that's hidden because it will short out against the back of the board, and that would be bad. So we're going to pick the board up by the heatsink. I'm going to need to remove these little plastic covers off the back because it won't go through the holes in the I/O shield with these covers on. So I'm going to take these covers off. Just the one on the VGA and the DVI. The DisplayPort and HDMI ones can stay in. We're going to lower the board in. Notice how I'm holding the board, touching the case, so I'm grounded. Nothing is plugged in because we don't want to get electrocuted. And right now, I want to make sure I can count and see the standoffs through these holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can't see the one here, but I know it's there. 8 and 9. Make sure these cables are not caught underneath the motherboard. And you're going to have to push in on the board this direction as you tighten it down. Now my electric screwdriver is set to a setting of 3. I'm going to put the speed on low. It's the same torque setting I've used for all the other components. It doesn't matter where you start. I think I really need to remagnetize this. Magnetized screwdriver isn't going to hurt anything. If anything, a non-magnetized screwdriver is going to create more problems. As you can see, when it drops the screw onto the motherboard, you can scratch the board that way. It's not likely, but it's possible. And you just want to get the screws started. So I'm starting right here. I really need to remagnetize this. We're starting right here in the center. Oh, that's really weak. All right. I don't want to stop and have to edit, so I'm just going to work with it. So bear with me here for a second. This it's getting funny now. You know what? Let's do that one in a minute. Let's go to this side. Get that one started. I don't know what happened. It just kind of wore its magnetism out. But we can, I've got a video where I showed you the magnetism tool where you can magnetize. I just need to run it through that. Sometimes I just need to slow down. Line it up. And again, we're just starting them. I would really advise you not to do it like this. If your screwdriver is weak, remagnetize it. It doesn't seem to be, if I go real slow and gentle, look at that, it almost landed right in the hole. That's par for the course. All right, let's see, we got 4 more to go. Let's try that middle one again. I'm going to hold on to the screw with one finger. Cheap. That's good. And we've got the 3 along the top. I know this corner one is going to be pretty easy to get to from this angle, so we'll grab that one. And we will grab the other one and do the other corner. I can't see it either. Kind of going for feel here. This is called making my job a lot harder. And again, imagine if the screwdriver wasn't magnetized at all, how much more difficult it would be. Oh, I dropped it. Now, if you drop a screw like I just did, it's really important you get that screw out. You don't want to forget it's in there because it will more than likely ground something out. And let's see if we can just turn the case around a little bit and give you another angle. At this point, we can actually take the case and flip it up or flip it down. And we should hear that screw come out. Oh, yep, there it goes. In fact, I can actually leave it like this at this point because I can see better, and therefore you should be able to see better. And it should also not be as difficult to put these final screws in since I won't be tipping them completely upside down. You see that standoff right there? I'm hoping this GoPro's picking it up. I'm just pushing the motherboard a little bit this way. I want that standoff to be as centered as possible behind the hole. Now I'm going to tighten them down. I'm going to put the speed on high. And I'm going to just do opposite corners. And then I'm going to do the edges. And then I'm going to do the middle. It's not really critical that it's done in that order. Look at that. It will not fit there. There we go. We got it. With a regular manual screwdriver, I'd be able to get in there, but with this screwdriver, it's being blocked. That bit is just about an inch too short. But we're good. We now have the motherboard installed into the case. And at this point, we can start doing some of the wiring. I have tried and I have tried and I have tried to film the cabling with the GoPro camera, and it's just not working out. And this process has taken me much longer than I thought because I have to film, and then in order to check what I filmed, I've got to open this unit up and then pull the GoPro out of it, right? And then take the memory card out, and then I can see what I filmed, and then I got to put it back in. And let's say that this wasn't tilted enough, it wasn't tilted further down. I have no way to know how to put it back to the same tilt position or how to adjust it because I have to move it from its previous tilt position to open it to get it out of its case. So that's not working well. I do want to thank Alex in Pocatello, Idaho for sending me the GoPro Hero 1. I do understand that the Hero 3 is a lot better and that you can monitor the video through a smartphone application, which wouldn't help me anyway because I don't have a smartphone, but for the most part it was a fun experiment, and I think I'm done with it now. I'm glad I didn't buy it, so again, thank you to Alex for being kind enough to loan this to me. I've had it about a month, so hopefully he's not missing it or thinks I stole it. I'm gladly sending it back. We'll just set that over here to get it out of the way. And What we're going to do now is the cabling in the traditional manner with the steady camera, and we'll get our close-up shots. So where we're going to start is with the cabling. I've got the bag of modular power supply cords right here. I've got our SATA cables out of the motherboard box right there. And so the first place we start when we hook up the power supply are the two main cables that go to the motherboard power, because they're already hooked up to the power supply, they're ready to rock and roll. And regardless of what build, whether it's AMD or Intel, the motherboard power is always going to have to be hooked up, so might as well hook that up first. We're going to start with the largest connector here. This is a 24-pin connector. And now, rather than just plug it on to the motherboard, we're going to feed it through this grommet here, through the back, and then I want to find the grommet that's closest to this connector right up here in the corner, if you can see that, which looks like where this big group of wires is for the umbilical, so we can bring it in right there. Now this does have a tab on one side, and we just will line that up. It only plugs in one way. In other words, I can't turn it 180 degrees. It will not. The plugs have funny shapes to them, and they'll only fit in the proper way. So we're going to line it up, and the clip on the side should click into position once I get it properly aligned. And it just requires a bit of wiggling and pushing at the same time. And you can feel that clip and see that it's on, and give the cable a slight pull, and the cable shouldn't fall off. If the cable falls off, it wasn't clipped into position properly. Next, we've got the 8-pin CPU power connector. Now I want to address a question I see, and that is, I mentioned that this is a semi-modular power supply because the motherboard power cables are already connected to the power supply. They're not modular. They do not disconnect from the power supply. Why? Because every motherboard needs power. It's not an option. You have to have it. So then why do they make power supplies that also have these cables modular? Some are fully modular, some are semi-modular. This is semi-modular. Well, the reason they do that and make it fully modular would be if your power supply were to die and you had all this fancy cable management that you didn't want to undo, you could simply unplug all the cables from the back of the power supply, change the power supply box out, and then plug the cables right back in, assuming that those cables are compatible with the new power supply that you bought. So these cables, for example, would probably work on any CORSAIR power supply, maybe even Seasonic, since Seasonic makes a lot of CORSAIR power supplies. But even in this case, we would have to just remove the two power cables from the motherboard if we were to get the same power supply, and we wouldn't have to replace the modular cables. We just reuse them. So that can make a power supply replacement much, much faster. On the other hand, if you're upgrading the power supply, the cables may or may not be compatible depending on the model and the manufacturer. So hopefully that clears up any confusion. Now the 8-pin power connector, we're going to run it the same way, right through this grommet down here on the bottom, and then right up through the top in the back of this computer. Let me turn it around here. You can't really see it, but way up in the top, there's a small opening, and we're just going to feed that cable right through there, just like that. And if I turn the case back around, that cable's coming out right here. I'm just going to pull it through. You can see I've got it right here. Again, a clip on one side, and on this motherboard, the clip is going to go towards the edge. So I've got to orient that in the right position. Same way, it will not install upside down. It will not plug in. And you've got to get it properly aligned, and when you push it on, you should hear it click, just like so. And that gets our power supply cables hooked up to our motherboard, and now we can move on with more cables. Now, one cable that's bothering me right now is this fan header, or this fan cable for this exhaust fan right here. And on this motherboard, we have a system fan header there. It's a 4-pin plug, and this is a 3-pin connector, and the 3-pin connector will work fine. It's got little grooves on the connector, and right now will be a good time to plug that in It's going to go right on there just like that, and that gets our external fan hooked up. Okay, now we can hook up power to the optical drive and the SATA drive. So I'm going to open up the bag that has our modular cables. Let's see what we got in here. We've got a PCIe cable, that's for powering a video card. Another PCIe cable for powering a video card. Another PCIe cable for powering a video card. And guess what this is? It's a PCIe cable for powering a video card. So that clearly has enough power cables for 2 high-power video cards. And let's see, we've got an adapter here to go from a Molex to a floppy style power connector, which we will not be using. That'll go back in the bag. And what I'm looking for is a cable, preferably one cable that'll be long enough just to keep the cable as clean as possible, that'll reach the SATA drive and the optical drive. I don't know, I might have to use 2 cables. There's quite a distance between them. This is a Molex connector. We won't be using that. And this is SATA. And this is, oh look, another Molex to the floppy style power connector. So they give you 2 of those. Don't know what you're going to use that for. Maybe some USB hubs or something. And this is a combination. Oh, this is more Molex connectors. So we won't be using the Molex connector. The Molex connector, just to give you kind of a close-up of that. The Molex connector is this squarish, well, I guess it's more of a rectangle, isn't it? And it's got rounded edges, so it only goes in one way, and it's been replaced on drives with the SATA connector, which is completely different looking. I don't know if it's focusing or not on that, but that's SATA, that's Molex. This is the old style, this is the new style. And so there's nothing old in this computer case, so we'll throw that back in the bag. And clearly, we have 3 choices here. Actually, as far as the video power goes, we're not going to do that yet, so those are going to go back in. So the question becomes, are any of these longer? One of the ways you can tell if one is longer than another is by counting how many connectors it has on it. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They all appear to be the same length, so I guess it doesn't matter which one we pick. And this end here that's got the end that's different, I guess would be the best way to explain it, and has the most distance between it and the next connector. This is the end that goes in the back of the power supply. Now on the back of the power supply, it actually tells you peripheral and SATA will go on the top row here, and then the blue connectors on the back of this power supply are for your video power, for video cards. So both rows on each side are either to your drives or other powered hardware like a USB hub that might be powered, and the blue ones to the video card. It's a pretty simple design. It doesn't really matter which one you use. In other words, this connector here I can plug into any of the 6 available PCI or what they call peripheral and SATA connectors on the back of this power supply. So to keep the cabling as clean as possible, I want to put it on the bottom connector. Let's see if I can turn this around so you can see it. I want to put it on the bottom connector all the way closest to the edge of the board so that you don't see the cabling. We're trying to avoid, seeing the cabling. And we're going to push that cable through right out to the back. And then we'll see if this one cable, that's a long cable, it might actually do the job to power both the SATA and the optical drive. That'll be great if we only have to use one cable, because that means cabling it's going to be a lot easier. It's going to be a lot cleaner looking. So let's turn the case around. This is the part that really intimidates people, because they see all these cables, right? And they go, oh, what do I do with all these cables? Just ignore all these cables. Just shove them aside and get them out of your way. We're only paying attention right now, right here, to this one cable. This is all we're interested in right now. So the power cable, the SATA power cable, Only goes on one way. It's got a little groove on the bottom of it. And we're going to plug that right into the bottom of our SATA drive. You might have to actually hold the SATA drive in position when you do this, so you might push it out the other side. And it doesn't click or anything like that. You can feel when it's in. And it looks like we're going to be a little bit short here to reach, I mean, just barely to reach the optical drive. But let's take a look and see. Let's turn it back around and see if it'll stretch. We don't want to put too much tension on the cable. Remember, this is going to be shipped, and it's going to be probably handled really roughly in shipping. In most cases it is. And will that connector fit? I mean, it is just a ½ inch too short. Now, there's a couple of different ways that I can resolve this. I can move this optical drive from the top position down to the bottom position. That solves that problem. I'll have plenty of cable. But then I'm not going to like the way the outside looks. And let's face it, we're going to be looking at the outside a lot more than we're going to be looking at the inside. So the other thing I could do would be to use an adapter, say to take this SATA drive here and to physically move it. So if I unplug it, see, even though CORSAIR puts the drive down on the bottom, there's no reason why we can't move the drive right up here to the top. I mean, that'll work equally as well. Just because they shipped it that way, you can see that drive slips in any position. That's a lot easier to move. It really doesn't make a difference where that is. Heat's not going to be an issue here. We've got fans that are going to be blowing over our video card, but that's not going to interfere with that because most of the circuitry for the video card is going to be down below at this point here. And even then, it's still going to blow over the hard drive. It's not as though the hard drive is going to block the airflow. So with the hard drive in that position, let's try this again. Let's come back around. And that's why I say how you do your cabling is very individual based on what hardware you've selected, what case you've got, for example, how your case is laid out, and how long your power supply cables are, and how much hardware you've got to hook up. So I really want to keep just one power cable as much as possible while keeping my optical drive in that position because that's important to me. May not be important to you. So anyway, I already explained that. So we're going to plug that on to the back of the SATA drive. Now we can push this through and we should have no problem reaching the optical drive. And bam, that's it. We've just hooked up the hard drive and the optical drive. All right, so all their other power cables can go back in the bag. I've left the video power cables on top because those will be the next ones we want when it comes to that, when we go to install our video card. But that's, like I say, that'll be the last thing. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull out one set of SATA cables. This motherboard rather, came with two sets, or two pairs. And of course it's one SATA connector, one cable per drive. Now one of these cables has a little 90-degree angle to it on one end, and the rest of them are all straight. This one that has the 90-degree angle is really intended to go in the back to prevent the cable from sticking out too far, but I actually typically use it right up here on the optical drive, and that just plugs in right up on top. Okay. And these are our SATA connectors here. And you should really refer to your motherboard manual on this to determine which SATA connector is which. Now on this motherboard, this bottom one is, first of all, they're all SATA 3, meaning 6 gigabit per second. But you'll see there are two separate on the bottom and two separate on the top. Now the ones on top on this motherboard are a Marvel controller. The rest are the Intel controller, and this also has a SATA Express socket, which is different than the regular SATA. So this isn't going to plug into the SATA Express. And you can use either the SATA Express or SATA ports 5 and 4, which are all the bottom ones, but you can't use all three. You have to pick one or the other. We're not using anything with SATA Express, and in fact, we're never even going to use, on this build, we only have two things to hook up, the optical drive and the SSD. So we're going to use SATA ports 0 and 1, which are these two on the bottom. 0's on the bottom and 1 is above it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the optical drive disconnected for right now because I want the hard drive to go in SATA port 0, and that's simply going to line up in one direction only. It only fits in one way, and it will click into position when I plug it in, and then I'm going to run it right out through the grommet. Turn the case around. Again, ignore these cables here. Just pay no attention to these cables at this time. And we're going to grab the SATA cable and plug it right into the back of the SATA drive, the SATA solid state drive, just like that. Then we're going to do the same thing with the other end of the optical cable. We've got the optical drive cable plugged in already. And we could run this out through the grommet if we want to make it a little cleaner. All right, so I pulled this cable through, and again, it's like weaving again. We're going to go down here, back where that connector is, the SATA connector on the motherboard, and pull it through. And again, with the clip facing out, it's going to go above the other one. That's why it's important we hook the bottom one up first, because once we put this top one in, we're not going to be able to access that bottom one. See what I'm saying? You can't release the bottom one now until you release the top one first, because the top one's blocking it. It's kind of common sense. And you can already see how clean our cabling is looking, and we can wire tie the external fan wire to make sure that that gets wire tied up before we put our video card in, because that's going to make the space really tight. Now I went ahead and I wire tied this power cable to this fan, and I'm just going to shove that power cable right over the I/O shields or the I/O ports in the side of the fan, and just going to push that aside, and it just kind of tucks it out of the way so it's sight unseen, out of sight, out of mind. That's just aesthetics. It doesn't affect the way anything runs. It's just about keeping it looking clean. And speaking of keeping it look clean, there's really no sense in keeping this extra hard drive tray inside of the case. There's nothing good that can come of that. It potentially blocks a little airflow. What I'll do is I'll put this piece in the motherboard box with the rest of the drive rail, since that's really where it belongs. And then when we go to do our cabling, we could actually take this drive and move it, if we want to a lower position to tighten the cables up a little bit. Or we can leave it in that position and wrap the cables. It's something to consider when you're doing your cabling. We can move that drive anywhere we want it. I think it looks really good up there personally, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Now the next cable we have to hook up, or we can hook up, and again, you don't have to hook these cables up in the order I'm showing you, but if you follow along with me, you won't have to worry about if you skipped any steps, or if you were to put a card in on this lower slot before you put your SATA cables on, you may have to remove this card to get to this connector. Same with this top connector. So keep that in mind when you're doing your cabling. So there is a method to my madness. So let's turn this around, because on the top of this case, right up here, because I think I showed this, there's a door. And this case has two USB 3.0 ports and two USB 2.0 ports, in addition to the microphone input and headphone output. And when you combine that with the switches, that's what all these cables are on the other side. We call them the front port umbilicals. And the easiest one to hook up is the biggest one, and that's your USB 3 cable. And all you need to do is take a look on the motherboard to see where the USB 3 header is located. And on most motherboards, it's located by the RAM, right up here, right where I'm pointing my finger. And so knowing that it's, well, it kind of sits between, it's closer to this grommet than this one. However, this grommet is really empty and this one's kind of full. So I think I'm going to run it. I think I'm going to run it on the bottom one. Again, it's just a judgment. There's no right or wrong way to cabling. This is all about looks. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring this cable in. See if I can do this where you can see it. We're going to bring this cable in through this grommet and pull it through the other side. We'll turn the case around. And there's a small notch on this connector, and there is a cutout on the plug, and all you have to do is line it up. There's also there's a pin missing right up in the upper left corner on this one. So this plug only goes in one way. I think it's a bad design personally. They should know better by now, because nothing holds this plug in place other than these little plastic notches that are in the cable itself. And if anything were to fall off in shipping, it would be this. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody were to call me and say, hey, my front USB 3.0 isn't working, and I would advise them to open the case and check this cable. It would be nice if it had a clip like the SATA connectors do, but that plugs in, and it does click in, but it's such a minor click. It's not very sturdy. I mean, if you pull on it, see that it's plugged in. Actually, that's holding in pretty good. On a lot of motherboards, it just pops right back off. And then while we're doing the USB stuff, these ports all along the bottom here are all USB. So we have, how many of them? USB 3, USB 2, USB 1. Now those aren't the speeds of the USB. That's USB 2.0 port 1, USB 2.0 port 2, and USB 2.0 port 3. I get the words out. So if I turn the case back around and look for that other USB cable, that is not this one. This one has the two connectors. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's your front port audio, but it kind of looks like that. It's a little smaller. And this cable here says USB. It's a completely different looking connector, and that's how you can easily tell USB 2.0 from USB 3.0 from the internal headers of the cables and the motherboards. And this cable, we will, again, this is a good time to straighten any tangles out and make sure everything's out of your way. You know, move things aside if the cable's looking overwhelming. Think about when a barber cuts your hair, or you've seen barbers cut hair and they'll use hair clips to hold certain hair back where they're cutting other hair. They don't look at every hair on your head and they're not overwhelmed with, oh my God, I gotta cut millions of little hair follicles. They do it a section at a time, bit by bit. So we're building the wiring in a very similar fashion. Just take something if you need to and set it aside like that. Whatever it takes for you to not feel so intimidated by the cabling, because all these other cables we've already hooked up. Well, we haven't hooked up the fan power cables to the front, but all the other ones we have hooked up. So all we're looking at now is just this one cable. It's not so overwhelming when you're focused on just one cable. And because the USB ports are down on the bottom of this board, they're way down here on the bottom, we could actually run this through the same holes that we're using for the power supply down here. So that's what I'll do, is I will run this cable right through here and then pull it through and bring the case around. And the USB 2 ports, the three of them that are here, are all equal. So it doesn't matter which one you use. Now, there is a notch cut out in the socket, but there is no notch on the plug. However, the plug does have a pin that's blocked, and each one of these has a pin that's missing. So if you take a look at it, or if it's hard to see, look at your user manual. In this case, the missing pin is in the upper left corner. So I want to make sure that the blocked pin is in the upper left corner. And I can plug that in any of the three available ports. I want to use the one that's closest to the wiring grommet so that you see as little wire as possible. Now there's two less cables we've got to worry about, and believe it or not, we're almost done. Now because we don't need these power cables or this adapter right now, I'm going to just kind of get them out of the way, set them over here. Now let's take a look at what cables we've got left. Turn this back around. And we have the front switches and LEDs, which are these thinner cables. And there's one wide cable left here. And this is your front port audio connector. And this has two connectors on the end. One is labeled AC97 and the other is labeled HD audio. So AC97 connectors were used primarily on older motherboards. I haven't run across a motherboard in recent years that uses the AC97 connector. You use one connector or the other, not both. And generally what I do is grab a wire tie and tie up the one I'm not going to use. If you're not sure which one your board uses, you see both plugs are exactly the same as far as how they fit in. So you can plug an AC97 plug into an HD audio socket and vice versa, but your audio, your front port audio isn't going to work. If you're building a new system, odds are it's going to be using the HD audio. I mean, unless you bought something that was old and refurbished. So I'm not sure why a nice modern case like this would have this backwards compatibility to AC97 to such old hardware. Personally, I don't think it's necessary anymore. The AC97 stuff has been gone for such a long time, at least as far as I know. I don't see the point in including it. It just adds a little confusion. So we're going to use the one labeled HD audio, and we're going to again feed it in the same place we just ran that USB 2 connector, right here through the bottom. And pull it right through to the other side. Now on most motherboards, not all, but on most, the front audio connector is on the very bottom left. And again, you can refer to your motherboard manual that's specific to your board, but if you're following along with me using the same board I'm using, obviously yours is going to be in the same place. And it actually says audio right on it. And again, there is a notch in the socket. However, the plug does not have a notch in the plug. Instead, the plug has a pin that's missing, that's blocked. And so does the socket. And so this will only plug on one way. So making sure we grab the one that says HD audio, we have to orient it to match where the missing pin is, which in this case is on the lower left. So we'll make sure that's on the lower left, which means the words, just like on the USB connector, the words are going to face down. And then it just plugs straight in. And that's hooked up our front port, headphone output, and microphone input located up front. Now I quickly grabbed a wire tie and just tied that extra AC97 cable up on that front port audio connector to keep it nice and clean. Let's go back around here because we just have a couple more cables to hook up, and we can test fire this before we go any further. So these two cables here, let's see, what do we have? One is the power switch, one is the reset switch, and this one is going to be the LEDs, one for the hard drive and one for the power light. So we're going to start with the LEDs because they're on the edge of the connector that we're going to use. So these are going to be the easiest ones to reach first. If we put these in first, then we're going to have to squeeze these in between, and that makes our job a little more difficult. Now this is pretty standard on Gigabyte boards. If you're using another manufacturer board, just take a look at your owner's manual and see where it tells you the hard drive LED and power LED go versus where the power switch and the reset switch go, to determine the best order to connect them so you're not having to squeeze in between them. And I'll show you what I mean here. Let's take the LED cables, right? Hard drive LED, power LED. Let's take a look at where the connector is on the motherboard. And on most motherboards, it's in the bottom right corner. In this case, it's enclosed in a type of plug that has different colors along the bottom of it. And the hard drive LED is going to go on the bottom left corner, and the power LED is going to go on the top left corner. Both positive cables are going to be on the very end, and that's very important with an LED. An LED is a light-emitting diode, and a diode is a one-way street for power. What that means is if you hook it up backwards, the LED won't work. It won't hurt anything if you've plugged it in the right space, but you've plugged it in upside down.
You've got what we call the polarity reversed. You've got negative where positive should be and positive where negative should be. It won't cause any damage. It's just that your LEDs won't work. You'd be surprised the number of systems that I get in for repair that somebody has worked on or somebody has built themselves, and they've paid no attention to the fact that their LEDs don't work. Like the one that's most common is the hard drive LED. It just never blinks. It never comes on. And I'll look in there and see that for years the hard drive LED was hooked up incorrectly. And all I do is flip it around, and a hard drive LED is important to me because that's how I know if the system is locked up or if the system is working. If the system, with the powerful systems that we have today, it doesn't really play as big of a role as it used to, but what used to happen is a system would appear to be not responding, and what it was really doing was reading the hard drive, doing some work, and was just pressing the processor and the computer resources as hard as it could. But without the hard drive LED coming on, it left you the appearance that the computer was sitting there doing nothing when in fact it was working its tail off. And if your reaction to that is to shut the machine off and turn it back on again or hit the reset button, you could corrupt the data on the drive or lose the file you were working on. So I think hooking the LEDs up is pretty darn important. The power LED as well, especially with the systems that are as quiet as these systems are today. Many of the systems I build are so quiet that without the power LED, I have no idea if they're on because you can't hear them running anymore. So I kind of make a big deal about it, but then I like to do things right. What's the point of hooking it up if you're not going to hook it up right? You might as well just leave it disconnected. The LEDs aren't required for the computer to operate. They're there to convey information to you. So I always check these things because they're important diagnostic tools during the ownership of the computer for both myself as a tech and for the owner of the computer who's using it. Now, because the connector we want to use is down here on this bottom corner, I'm going to go ahead and bring the cables once again through this bottom connector where our power supply cables are. So let's turn this around. All right, so we're going to grab the hard drive LED and the power LED cables, which are part of this, looks like a 4-wire connector, not these twisted ones are the power switch and reset switch on this case. If you have a different case, your wires are probably going to look a little bit different, but you're going to have the same connectors. So we're going to go ahead and run this right through the bottom grommet, and we'll pull that through, and we'll turn the case around. And here you can see that there's a little negative and positive listed on the connector for the hard drive LED and a negative and positive listed on the connector for the power LED. So what that means for the positive cable for the hard drive LED to be on the bottom left, I've got to make it so that the text is facing down, and we're going to hook it up to the very two bottom farmost connectors on the bottom left. And then just above that, the power LED. Now the power LED is split into positive and negative, so we can face the lettering up or down. And the positive, again, goes on the topmost post on the upper row, just above the positive LED for the hard drive, and the negative one goes just above the negative LED connector for the hard drive LED below it. So those two cables are lined up one above the other. Now again, this may vary depending on the motherboard that you have, but if you have a Gigabyte board, this is pretty universal with Gigabyte. ASUS follows very closely with most of their boards the same format. I'd like to see them all agree and do it all the same way. And of course, as I've already mentioned, you can always check your motherboard manual and it'll have a picture of this showing you where the connectors go. Now, only the LEDs matter for positive and negative. The switches don't matter. As long as you plug the switch on the right connector, there's no way of getting it upside down. Okay, finally, we can hook up our power switch and our reset switch, which are these two last cables right here. We're not going to worry about the front fans, as I've already mentioned, that we don't have to hook those up just yet. We don't want to build the system too far and find out what we've done thus far isn't working. So in order to give us some peace of mind, as soon as we hook up these last two cables, we can now test fire the system using the onboard video that it has prior to hooking up any more fans or hooking up our video card. So it's kind of exciting, isn't it? So here we've got the power switch and the reset switch, and once again we're going to go ahead and just feed them right through in the same place, in the same way as we just did the LEDs.
So we'll do these, I do these in pairs. So I do because there's a hard drive LED and a power LED, that's one pair. And because there's a power switch and a reset switch, that's another pair. You'll see there was USB 3 and USB 2 up front, which was a pair. And so I always do them with that logic because they all go to the same, they're all in the same family, and in this case go on the same connector for the front port umbilicals. So we'll turn this back around. Now the reset switch, again, a good time to untangle the cables. The reset switch is going to go right beside the hard drive LED on this motherboard and pretty much on every Gigabyte motherboard. And if we put the power switch in first, we won't be able to see the connector below it. So that's why I start with the reset switch and go ahead and install that right on the bottom 2 pins adjacent to the hard drive LED. And the power switch, again, there's no positive or negative on a switch. It doesn't matter if it's right side up or upside down. I like to keep the words facing up so that I can read them as a tech. And those go on the adjacent pins on the row above that. All right, so I've got out my monitor, my keyboard, my mouse, and I'm going to go ahead and plug everything in, and let's see if she fires up. So these are the USB receivers for the wireless keyboard and mouse. And just here on the back, I'm going to plug them in up on the top. There's some yellow USB ports here, which are, they're yellow for a reason that I'm sure the manual explains, that I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me what they're for. I don't care, but they work as USB. That's all I care about at this point. Then I'm going to go ahead and plug the monitor in using the DVI cable, using the onboard video on the motherboard, because we can. The CPU that we've got has the Intel HD graphics built into it, so we don't need to install the video card yet to ensure that everything we've got so far is going to work. Finally, I've got the power plug. These are the only things I'm plugging in. Switch is in the off position on the back of the power supply. I'm going to go ahead and plug the power cable in, flip the switch into the on position. Okay, nothing's happened. That's good because I haven't actually hit the power button yet. Power button's up here, and this is where you see if all your hard work has paid off so far. It should do a power on self-test and say there's no bootable devices, so let's see what happens. Board's lit up. The board actually has a really cool lighting thing right along the side here. Here we go. Reboot and select your proper boot device, or insert boot media and selected boot device and press a key. Other thing I like to check is that our LEDs are working. We should have a power LED somewhere. Well, I guess you can't really see it in the light. Let me flip this light off, and maybe you'll be able to see this a little bit better. We'll turn that light off too. So there is a light right up here, and if I turn the machine off, that light goes off. When I turn the machine back on, that appears to be some kind of a hard drive LED. Where's the power LED? Well, that'll be a puzzle for me to figure out because, well, let's see what happens if I unplug the power LED. Does the light go off? Yep, it does. So that is the power LED. We'll see when we hook it back up that it looks like both the hard drive and the power LED are located right up here on the top. Sorry, you only get half my face, but you probably appreciate that anyway. And maybe you can see the lighting better inside of this board, the way that it's got this red light that goes right up inside the board. It's very, very cool. And of course, we didn't actually have to hook up the power switch on here to try it. We could have just used the power switch right up here in the top corner and turn the machine on and off that way as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and install Windows 7. And I've got a video that already demonstrates how I'm going to do that. It's going to be the exact same process for this machine, so I'll put a link to that in the video notes below. All right, now that we have our critical wiring hooked up, we've been able to verify the machine works. I've got Windows installed and activated with antivirus, SSD optimizations, made sure the latest BIOS is on the motherboard, made sure the latest firmware is on the solid state drive. Once again, that whole process is detailed out in previous videos, so I won't go over that again.
as this video's running long enough. In fact, it's taking me quite longer to make than I anticipated. I hope you appreciate the close-up shots during the wiring, because many of those had to be done 4 and 5 times. And as you can see, I think that the GoPro, if you can imagine, would have made that, well, you can just imagine my difficulty doing that wiring with the GoPro and then going back and looking at the footage and then adjusting the GoPro, doing it again, looking at the footage, before I finally gave up and said the GoPro wasn't going to work for that. At least not the original GoPro Hero. The Hero 3, maybe I'll try that, you know, if I get my hands on one at some point. But for right now, we're staying with the regular camera that I normally use. And at this point, because we know that everything that we've installed so far works, we know that anything we add after this, should the computer stop working, must be because of something we just added. You see the logic in that? So people ask me, why don't I burn in the computers? Well, when you install Windows 90, basically everything from Windows 95 up, especially as you got into Windows XP, the operating system installation procedure is so resource intensive that if there is a flaw in the memory, if there is a flaw in the BIOS, if there is a setting incorrect in the BIOS, generally speaking, you will not get Windows installed. It just won't install. And then people will often ask why I get the updates manually. Why don't I get a flash drive with all the updates on it and just update them locally? You got to remember, this is going to a customer who is going to be installing all future updates the traditional way. And I need to know that those updates are going to install without a problem. On occasion, I've built a new computer where Windows updates don't work, and I've got to figure out what the problem is. If all I did was load the updates locally, I would never know that problem, and I'd be getting a support call from the customer, and again, I'd be losing money. So for each machine, it goes through a fresh, clean Windows install. It's not a clone to install. I have to install all the drivers. Believe me, if I was building the same computer over and over and over again, I would still prefer to do a clean install on each one of them, because to me, that's the best burn-in. Now, the second best burn-in is to simply give it to the customer and let the customer use it, because there is no test like reality. I can simulate an office environment all day long, but when it's in an actual office environment, that's where the truth really exists. Does the computer function to the level of the customer's expectations? Is it meeting all of the customer's needs? Is it reliable? Is it fast? Is it quiet? All of those things can only truly be judged by the end user. But clearly you want to make sure you're not delivering something that's going to not work right off the bat, because that would be embarrassing. So once again, by installing Windows, the updates, the drivers, people ask why I install the drivers from the driver disk. Remember, these videos are for novices. These are for beginners. And I don't think beginners should be going out to websites downloading drivers. It's a dangerous thing. When you're just starting out with computers, just use the driver disks that come with your computer. And then once you get your computer up and running and you want to see if there's newer drivers, maybe start with your video card, because those are traditionally the easiest ones to find. You may not see much of a performance difference by upgrading your sound card driver or your network card driver or your chipset driver. Some people are just obsessed with having the latest driver. Sometimes having the latest driver is worse. Sometimes the latest driver has bugs and the previous version is actually better. So there's a reason why the motherboard manufacturers include a driver disk instead of just telling you to go online. Furthermore, you may not be able to get online if during the Windows installation it didn't detect your network card, which would require you to install the network card driver at a very minimum from the driver DVD. So for the more advanced users out there who want to get newer drivers or potentially newer drivers, they can go to the manufacturer's website and download those. But we don't cover that really in this series or in this channel, because what we're trying to do here is inspire you to build your own computer. And some people have said, well, why do you install Windows off a DVD? Why don't you install it off a flash drive? Well, you have seen me install Windows off a flash drive. I did it on the Nook. And you've also seen me install Windows from a USB external DVD drive. And you've also seen me install Windows right from the regular DVD. And the reason I do that is, again, for the novices, for the people who've never done it before, you should install directly off the DVD. You don't have any point of reference on how long anything should take, so it's not like you're going to say, wow, this saved me a lot of time by making it into a flash drive. And in the process of making it into a flash drive, to you, may be more complex than actually building the computer. So I'm a big believer in keeping things simple. Let's do one step at a time. And when you feel that you've grown to that level that you want to update your drivers, or you want to create a bootable flash drive to install Windows, there are plenty of resources out there using Google and YouTube where they have videos that demonstrate that. So please keep in mind, we're really here for the beginners, for the people doing it for the first time. Now, I realize there are people who've built computers who enjoy watching the building of computers because they're sick like me and they just really enjoy watching it and learning new tips and tricks on how different people use different techniques in the assembly process. My techniques come from years and years of experience. Other people's techniques come from what they read in a book. Some people's techniques just come from instinct, and other people's techniques come from how they were taught from a YouTube channel or school or a family member or friend. And without seeing those techniques individually, I can't say whether or not I condone them. However, the techniques you see me use are honed and crafted after doing this for as long as I've been doing it. And so because I build so many computers, I would be out of business long ago if I was building them incorrectly. So with all of that out of the way, this is just addressing a lot of the comments and emails I've been getting lately. One other one. People will say, do you recommend this motherboard or do you recommend this video card? The parts I recommend are the parts you see in my videos. When it comes to motherboards, there's only two motherboards I recommend, ASUS and Gigabyte. That's it. So if you ask me if I like the ASRock this, or the BioStar that, or the Foxconn this, the answer is going to be no. I don't like those boards. I wouldn't put my name on them because I have to warranty them. And I've had bad luck in the past with boards like from MSI that MSI denied problems that actually existed, and I had a flood of customers that, a number of them whose computers actually caught fire, which is a serious liability when you're in business selling computers. And MSI's lack of cooperation in that circumstance means I will never use them again. Even if their motherboards are fantastic today, I just can't take that risk. And if Gigabyte were to do that to me, they'd be scratched off the list. If ASUS ever did that to me, they'd be scratched off the list, and I'd start looking for somebody else. So that's why I use those particular parts. So any parts you see me use, unless I say otherwise in my video, I recommend. I'm going to recommend Seagate or Western Digital hard drives only when it comes to mechanical drives. I'm going to recommend Samsung solid state drives only. And again, this goes back to warranty, and it goes back to reliability, and it goes back to my reputation that what I build is quality and not necessarily the most expensive and also not the cheapest. Just really looking for that best bang for the buck. Now, that said, we are ready to put our video card in. You've been waiting for me to get to that, haven't you? You're like, shut up and get on with the video card. All right, chill out, relax. Get a glass of water, get some popcorn. It's all good. It's all gonna be okay. All right, I haven't done anything with the cabling, as you can see on this side. The cabling is still a mess. We don't want to do the cabling until the very final step because we don't know yet exactly how we're going to wire tie everything up until everything is installed, everything is hooked up, and we verify everything works. Then we can make it look pretty. All right, so let me turn this around, and let me step around here a bit, and this is what everybody wants to see. The EVGA 780 Ti with the ACX cooler, GDDR5 memory. I believe this has a 3-year warranty, which, remember, when you're picking a video card, you can't just be looking at price. Some of those cheaper video cards only have a 1-year warranty. I've seen some with 90-day warranties. And further, when you call them, should you need to call them for support, it can be exceptionally frustrating with some of these companies trying to get through to support. EVGA, in my experience, which, by the way, I haven't had to contact EVGA very often, but on the very rare occasion when I have, their customer service has been excellent. In fact, a few years ago I had to return an EVGA card. I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And they made the process very painless, very simple, easy to follow. And to me, that's worth paying an extra $20 for the video card. I mean, that's generally the price difference between, say, one GTX 780 Ti and another from one manufacturer, depending on the manufacturer. There are some cheap manufacturers out there, and as far as I'm concerned, you're gambling. That's not to say that a cheaper manufacturer's board's going to fail, but statistically speaking, in my experience, it's more likely to fail, and then you're more likely to have to talk to support, and then you're more likely to get ticked off, and then you're going to wish you'd have spent the extra $20 and got the EVGA card that never had the problem to begin with. And in the rare instance that it did happen, they will treat you with kindness and respect and expediency in getting you a replacement part that you will be glad you spent the extra $20. So I guess it just depends on if you're a gambling type or not. Now, in the box with the video card, we have a couple of power adapters. Now again, these power adapters are included when you don't have a when you don't have a power supply that has the right cables. We have the right power supply, so we aren't going to be using these power adapter cables at all. Then they also include this little bag here includes a DVI to VGA adapter. So the VGA is just the small, I don't know how well you can see that. It's just a small old style monitor plug, and then the DVI is the larger style video plug. So if your monitor doesn't have the DVI input on the back, because this video card only has DVI and HDMI and DisplayPort, there is no traditional VGA on this. You would have to adapt it to hook it up to a traditional VGA monitor. Or would you? Yeah, that's the way it appears. So we're going to go ahead and open this up and take it out. Like I said, you know, when I turn the camera on, this is all unscripted, unrehearsed. This is the first time I am unboxing this. This is the first time you're seeing it. It's not as though I'm just going to review it for 2 weeks, get a first opinion, and tell you what I think. I'm installing this as a recommended part to a customer. It is going to then live its life with that customer, its entire life, more than likely. And anytime during its life, if the customer has a problem in or on a warranty, who do you think they're going to call? They're going to call me. I want to avoid those calls, not because I don't like to talk to my customers, but because I like to not have the customer be inconvenienced by having any problems. Now on the side of this card, I'm going to just hold it up here by the edges. You'll see we've got our 2 DVI ports here. We've got what appears to be, I'm going to guess this is HDMI on this side. No, that looks like it's some kind of display port. What's this one? That's HDMI on that side. All right, there we go. Now we have a piece of protective plastic that they put on during shipping. It's important we remove that. So let's go ahead and take this plastic off of here, like so. And we'll get rid of that. Now there's also, down here where it plugs in, there's a protective cover. I really don't understand why they ship that cover. You can pretty much throw that cover away. I don't think you need it for anything. Or just hold on to it. It wouldn't hurt you to hold on to it. Maybe they like it put on if you were to send the card in for warranty, though. As long as it's in the anti-static bag when you send it back for warranty, you should be fine. Up here is another cover, and this cover can come off, and that's where your bridging connectors are when you're going to go SLI and hook up numerous video cards. Since we're only hooking up one video card, we're just going to go ahead and leave that on and keep it covered up so it stays dust-free. And I'm just looking to see, it appears, let's see if I can show you this. It appears we might have some plastic right on top of these fans. Yeah, we do. Let's go ahead and take that off. And is there a piece of plastic up here? Yeah. EVGA does like their plastic. I'm really holding this wrong. You really don't want to hold it up here by that piece, at least not without that rubber cover on it, because we don't want to static shock it. However, I am in a fairly static-free environment. It's a Arizona is a dry humidity, and as a result of that, we're a little more prone to static than more humid environments. However, you really want to avoid touching all of the metal components on this side. So if you can see the way I'm holding it, you can grab that by the heat sink. And then what we're going to do, we'll just set some stuff aside here, make some room. Slide this case over. Let's get this trash out of the way. We want to mount this video card in the topmost slot, the highest slot up. And so to make sure that that's going to fit okay, before I remove anything, I just want to make sure that we're going to have the room that we need, and I need to know which of the slots, these back slots right here, I need to figure out which of these slots back here I need to remove. So it looks like I'm going to need to remove the first two. So looking at this and lining it up, I can see my USB 3 cable is going to get in the way, but I can probably, I don't know, bend that up and out of the way that way. And then our video card should fit in. It does. It does. It fits in. It's going to fit in perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and set the video card down. And notice I'm setting it down with the electronic side facing up. I don't want it to short out against anything. I'm going to grab my screwdriver and I'm going to go ahead and take out these two top PCI covers. And we want to keep those bolts because we're going to put them right back in again. There goes one. Sometimes it helps to have three hands when you're doing this. But these little covers, you never know when you might want to put them back, so I always recommend keeping them. Don't throw them away. Throw them in the motherboard box with the directions and all the other spare parts. Now, these PCI Express slots have little retention clips on them, and I don't know how well you can see that, but they move forward and backward. You do not want to try and install anything in them with the retention clip closed. So by default, I like to open them all up and leave them open. I don't know why the manufacturers send them closed, because if you try and put that video card in with that retention lever closed, you can actually break the retention lever, you can break the socket, and you can break the video card. So make sure that retention lever is open, and then pick the video card up, line it up with the slot back here, your PCI slot, and as you bring it forward, line it up with the groove in the PCI Express slot and press in on it evenly until you hear it click. And if you don't hear it click, you can kind of give it a light tug and it shouldn't just fall out. That's how easy it is to install a video card. All right, now with our video card installed correctly, we can go ahead and secure it in place with the two screws we just removed from the PCI covers. And it doesn't matter if you start with the bottom one or the top one first, but generally you have to lift up on the card because of its weight to keep it from drooping. And we'll go ahead and just stick one of those screws in first, and then we'll put the other one right back in. And then just verify on the back that you're not too close to one of these dividers here that it's going to prevent getting the cable on. If it does, you'll have to loosen those screws and adjust the video card accordingly. So just be aware of that. It's something very simple to adjust if you find out later. And before we go any further, let's look at what else came in the box with the video card. We've got the video card driver. This is the driver I recommend you use. If you're a novice, you've never built a computer before, there's nothing wrong with the drivers that come with it. If you're an advanced user and you're familiar with updating your drivers, then of course you can go directly to NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, depending on who your graphics card maker is, and download the latest driver. But keep in mind that the latest driver may already be on the disk. And sometimes, like with EVGA especially, they'll include special utilities that you don't get from NVIDIA for overclocking and things like that. That's not uncommon. They also include a case badge right here. It's a metal case badge. It's kind of nice. They spend a little money on that you can stick onto your computer. And if that doesn't make your computer go any faster, they make sure to send you one that absolutely will. Look at that. Look at the performance that you can expect if you put these stickers on your computer. So I'm not putting these Go Faster stickers on the computer, but I will leave that up to the customer. That'll go in the motherboard box. Finally, we've got some information regarding the power and the adapters that they include for providing proper power to this video card. Some people build a computer, they forget to hook power to the video card, and they wonder why they're not getting any video. That's pretty much why. You have to make sure you put power to the video card, which we're going to do here in just a moment. This is our documentation, which includes our warranty information. All that's going to go in the motherboard box. They also include a poster. Now, the poster is probably the same one I've shown you before. Of course, you can hang that up on your bedroom wall or your bathroom wall if that helps you go. I don't know. I have no idea why, but there it is for you to do with as you please. So again, that goes to the customer, that goes in the motherboard box. And these are all sort of just unnecessary components that we need in the process of building a computer. That's for later reference, potentially. Okay. So everything else that came with the video card, the box, everything else is all empty, so we can just set that right over there. Now, the next thing we can do is grab our power cables, which I have right here, and we can hook power up to this bad boy. So we're going to need 2 PCI Express power cables. The PCI Express cables are actually labeled as PCI Express with the PCI-IE that's written on them. And we are going to need 2 of them. And remember, there were 4 in this bag, so we don't need anything else in this bag. That's all we're going to use. So let's go ahead and pull these 2 cables out. So remember, they got the blue end on one side, and they say PCIe with a split connector on the other side. So I'm going to begin by just simply undoing the wire ties on these cables. We'll start with one here. And on the back of the video card, as we already mentioned, sorry, not on the back of the video card, on the back of the power supply, if we turn this around a little bit, there is a section of blue connectors. Now you'll see the top of the blue connector says 6+2 PCI-E. That means that there are 6 connectors here, plus 2 optional ones. Not to be confused with this end, although technically I guess it wouldn't matter which end you used if you need all 8. However, the blue end is supposed to go to the matching blue end on the back of the power supply. Back of the power supply also says it's for the 4+4 pin CPU power, but that's already built into our power supply. That was why it's semi-modular. But I guess some motherboards require 2. We're not using a board of that caliber, so what I'm going to do is pick the connector that is closest, once again, to the edge of the case to keep the cabling as short as possible. And I'm going to go on the very bottom, just once again to keep the cabling as clean as possible. Now you have a choice here, if I can get this connector to fit. Now we can take the other end of the cable and we could simply plug it straight into the video card, but that's going to be kind of ugly having this cable hanging out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this cable right out through this grommet here on the bottom, just like I did the other power cable. We're going to bring it around through the back, and we can bring it in right through this grommet right here, and then we can plug it directly into the video card. Now, this video card has an 8-pin connector and a 6-pin connector, and these connectors can be used as 8 or 6 pin. So I'm going to go ahead and start on the 6-pin side since that's closest to me, and the clip is going to face in the down position. I'm just going to bend that 2-pin connector out of the way, and I will wire tie that in just a little bit when I do the wire tying, and that's going to go right onto that connector just like that. Then we simply repeat the process with the final power cable, which looks exactly the same. Remove the wire tie. I always connect it to the power supply first. We'll use the next connector down. Again, I can use any of the 4 connectors that are here, and then we'll go ahead and run that one exactly the same route we ran the previous one. Now we're simply going to pull the cable through the other side.
This one requires all 8 pins, which means we need to use the additional 2-pin connector. The clip also, just like this clip, the clip is going to face down. Not all video cards are like that, okay? So if you have a different video card, you need to pay attention to which way the clip goes on. And that is just simply going to line up. When you have it lined up correctly, it will snap in without any force. It'll just pop right on in. You actually heard that click. That's a good positive click versus hearing a crack. Now if I just clear a little room off the counter here, I'm going to put this stuff away. I'm going to go grab my monitor, keyboard, mouse, and we're going to do our final power on. Make sure it boots into Windows, install the driver that came with the video card, and all that'll be left to do is to clean up the cabling, put the cover back on, box it up, and get it shipped out to Chicago. Now there is one thing I did forget to hook up, and that's the 2 front fans. So let's do that. That's really fast and simple. If we turn this around on this side here, as you can see, I've already got my keyboard, mouse, monitor out. I'm ready to turn the thing on. I just got a little ahead of myself. There are 2 front fans, and because we have a video card in this computer, we want to make sure these fans are hooked up. If there was no discrete video card in this computer, then I'd say probably better off leaving these fans disconnected. However, these fans also have LEDs on them, so you still might want to hook them up anyway if you're going for that light effect look. And chances are, if you're going with a case like this, you're probably going to have a discrete video card, or GPU as some folks call it. And I'm just going to take the wire ties off of here, and I'm not going to worry too much about how pretty the cabling is at this point, because remember, we're just going to hook everything up to make sure that it works. And I just want to make sure that we've got 2 3-pin fan headers here, and we're going to bring them in. If I look and see where they've got to go on the board, we can bring them in right down here. I think is going to be, well, let's see, either this one or this one. Yeah, definitely the bottom one, the same one we've been using for the power supply cables. Try not to tangle them up into any other cables. We'll just pull those straight through. And we'll turn the computer around here. And right down here, right next to our front port umbilicals, we have 2 fan ports labeled System Fan 5 and System Fan 4. It doesn't matter which one goes where. There are 4 pins, even though the plug only has 3, but the plug does have little grooves on it, and there is a notch that sticks out. So basically, when you line it up, it will line up with the first 3 pins only in one direction, leaving the pin closest to the edge not used. That's normal. And we're going to do the exact same thing, same position with the other connector right next to that. So now everything, and I mean everything, is plugged in and hooked up, and if we did it right, should boot right into Windows and work, because we already tested it prior and we knew everything was working before we added those fans and this video card. So if for any reason it doesn't work, we're going to isolate the problem to what we changed since the last time it worked, right? That's how we diagnose things. It's a process of elimination. So let's go ahead and turn the computer around and get things plugged in and see if it turns on. So less talking, more doing. Right here I've got my wireless keyboard and mouse USB receivers. I'm going to just go ahead and plug those right in the back here onto the USB at the very top, which in this case they are yellow. We'll plug those in. I'm going to plug the DVI cable in of my monitor. I'm going to have to remove one of the covers on the back of the video card that covers the ports, and we'll plug that in. And then you'll see the last thing I plug in is power. But before I do that, I want to switch the power supply into the off position, then go ahead and add power. We'll switch the power supply back to the on position, and now we're ready. This is it. This is our final test boot. I believe that's the button right there. And let me step around so I can see what's going on. And I believe this light here controls, yes it does, it controls the front fan LEDs. I'm not sure how well you can pick that up. We'll turn them on because they look pretty. The fans are spinning kind of slowly and quietly, which is always a good thing. There's a switch right up here
like I say, turn it off and turn it on. In fact, we can cut these lights. Let's cut this light and this light. And then maybe you can see the case light a little bit better. And maybe you can't. And of course it matches the red light in the case. Now, whether or not this computer shakes around at all, because we're using a solid state drive, there's no harm in that. If it was a mechanical drive, you'd want to avoid any vibration while the drive is reading or writing. All right, so let me get these lights back on. Lights, camera, action. All right, now it's telling me that the video resolution is too low because it has not yet loaded the driver for a new video card, so it's defaulted to 800 by 600. And the Samsung Magician software, which is the software that comes with the solid state drive to help you make sure you have the latest firmware and that you're optimized for the best performance, is saying that the software can't display all the options in an 800 by 600 screen. That's fine. We can just go ahead and ignore that for now. Now here it's found our new graphics adapter and everything automatically, which is fine. We're going to close that. We're still going to install the driver that came with the motherboard. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we're going to put our EVGA disk in the drive, and in just a second here we should get the option on the auto run menu that should appear. Now the screen did get a little darker because my monitor's broadcasting light into the camera, making the camera think everything's a lot brighter. I could probably turn the brightness down on the monitor, but at this point I want you to focus on the monitor anyway. You don't need to be looking at me. You need to be looking over here. Now we're just going to go ahead and run the run.exe file, which is the auto run. It says, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. And the option to install the drivers now is all here. The option to install the video drivers, DirectX 10 or 11. The applications I was mentioning that are available from EVGA and not directly from NVIDIA in this case are the EVGA Precision X software and the EVGA OC scanner. So what I'm going to do is just click Install Video Drivers, and we're going to go ahead and let that run. It's going to take just a minute, so we'll fast forward to the end of that. And then it's probably going to require a reboot. Whether it requires a reboot or not, I'm going to reboot. It's come up and said you need .NET Framework 4. It says your installation will not occur because the same or higher version of .NET Framework 4 has already been installed on this computer. That's fine. That's because I already went to Windows Update, installed Windows prior to installing this graphics card. So it doesn't need to install Framework 4 because Framework 4 is already installed. So it continues with the installation, and we'll click OK. And here it's going to decompress the files and begin to install them. So now this is the point where we can jump forward to when this installation is completed. Here we've got the standard end user license agreement, of which none of which are standard. Who knows what it says or what it really means. There's even lawyers who don't even know what some of this stuff means. We'll go ahead and choose the Express install, click Next, and continue to wait for that driver to finish installing. Here, Windows Security comes up. It says, we don't know if this is safe software or not. Of course it's safe. It's from a reputable manufacturer, so click Install. Where you want to be cautious is if you're browsing the web, and something like that should pop up on your screen where you're browsing the web. Pretty much want to always choose not to install. But when you're installing drivers, that's a pretty common thing. It's just a security feature. Windows isn't smart enough to know what's spyware, what's viruses, and what's real. So it's depending on you to guide it safely. So again, anytime you're installing drivers, you always want to go ahead and approve that. It's come up again. It wants a permission to install the next driver. Go ahead and click Install again. And it is kind of a pain, but it is there for security reasons. Without that, people could put spyware or viruses on the CD itself, which has happened in the past, and infect the computer, whether it's a rogue employee that did it or the manufacturer of the disks, or a simple mistake. Maybe somebody in one department was playing with viruses and someone in another department was developing the driver disk, and somehow the network got compromised, and before you know it, you've got a bunch of driver disks that are infected. So that's going to help prevent those infections. That's the purpose behind it. Although it seems like most people just ignore it anyway and just click install and they end up installing viruses and they go, well, how did I get the virus? Because you clicked install. Okay, but as I mentioned, with drivers, it's all good. Now here we've got the Sound Blaster X5 MB3. The current selected audio device is disabled, not present, not supported by the application, or has unplugged jack connections. In this case, we don't have any speakers plugged in, so that's correct. It has unplugged jack connections. Do you want to select another audio device now? No, I don't. The option here to create a desktop shortcut for the NVIDIA GeForce experience is checked. I recommend leaving that checked. And then we hit the infamous restart now. Now, the next time the computer comes up, the screen should look a lot more refined because we're going to be out of that 800 by 600 mode. We should be into the 1920 by 1080 mode, I believe, is what this monitor displays. It's all going to be limited on what your monitor is capable of if you have this video card. So here you'll see how fast Windows loads. As I sit here and talk to you, the Windows flag has just barely appeared. And before you know it, the desktop's going to be up. Bingo. Just like that. And that's why I love solid state drives so much. And this is when I talk about quality. Take your computer at home, turn it on at the same time you saw me restart this one, and see whose boots faster. And then base that on how much you paid versus how much the system cost. And I think you'll find that this system is much faster for the money than whatever you currently have, except in the future when you're watching this, in which case what you have will be cheaper because the technology will evolve, it'll get faster, and it'll get cheaper. But for today, this is a very, very fast system. It's always going to be a fast system. However, as more and more resources get demanded of it, that's where it starts to bog down. If the owner of this computer, for example, goes and gets some game that requires just a heck of a lot of resources, it may actually bring this computer to its knees. And that's bound to happen at some point, but hopefully not for at least a few years. And if and when that does occur, he should be able to just simply add another video card and go into an SLI mode, or remove the video card he's got now, assuming it still works, sell it to a friend or sell it on Craigslist or eBay. Use that money to help pay for the latest and greatest, whatever that happens to be 3 or 4 years from now, when more than likely that scenario would even happen. So what I'm going to do now, since I know everything works, I've got our GeForce driver installed, everything's dead quiet. I'm going to just lean into this computer. Can you even hear it? Is the microphone even picking it up? That's the CPU fan. I don't hear the power supply fan. I don't hear the 2 video card fans. I don't hear the rear exhaust fan. I don't hear the 2 front intake fans. I do want that light on. I do like the lights, all right? I admit it. I like the lights. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do, since I know everything works, is I'm going to wire tie everything, and then I'll come back to button it all up, show you how I put it back in the box and get it ready to ship out. All right, well, here's the gaming computer all built and completed. You can see I've got the wire tying done here on this side. This is kind of the messy side, if you will. This is the very shallow side where all the cables are meant to be hidden. There's no window panel on this side. If we turn it around this way, you'll see we've got real nice cleanup on the wiring. I really like that. And I moved some of the wires around. I noticed there was a hole over here just above the power supply where I could run the front audio cable, which was a little cleaner. I also forgot there was a little speaker plug that you can add on to the front port header or the motherboard to get your power on self-test beep codes, which in most cases should just be a single beep when the computer turns on. I've gone ahead and added that for those of you with an eagle eye and maybe saw that down there. But that's pretty much our cabling. And I've gone ahead and left, I've got the keyboard and mouse wireless receivers plugged in the back here. So there's my keyboard and mouse. And I just want to turn this on one more time just to make sure that I didn't pull any cables out during the wire tying process. In fact, let me just turn this around a little bit here so you can see what I'm doing. These are my 2 USB wireless dongles for the keyboard and mouse. I like to keep those up on the top USB ports, closest to where the keyboard and mouse input is on this motherboard and on others similar to it. Make sure the power supply is in the off position.
Grab the video cable next, and we need to remove one of these covers. Remember, we're plugging our video in down here. We're not plugging it in up here. This is all the built-in motherboard video that we're not using. Technically, it's on the CPU. It's just the ports are built on the motherboard. And I'm just going to go ahead and plug the DVI connector in here. Doesn't matter which one of those connectors we use. And then the last cable I hook up, right? So there's just 4 things I'm using. It's the keyboard, mouse, monitor, and power. No internet, no speakers, no printers. This is all we want for right now. Flip the switch to the on position. And let's turn it on. You can see that fan starting to spin. You can see some of the lights on the back here. Shining through the back. They're not supposed to. Well, it's not that whether or not they're supposed to or not, it's just that they're intended to be seen from this side. If I can turn this around without completely running everything over. There we go. You can see we've got our Hyper 212 fan running, our rear exhaust fans running, our 2 front fans are running. And if we hit this switch, you'll see that turns the light on and off on the case. You can see our long red line inside of the decorative lighting that's inside. And it's booted to Windows. You saw how fast that was, right? Now to shut it down, we can now put the panels back on it. So we'll just hit the power button, and that will cycle it through a normal shutdown, just like clicking on start and shutdown. Shuts the computer off. I'm going to go ahead and pull the power and video cables, which is a little tight to do on this angle. And now I can put the side panels on. Since I know everything works and it looks good, I'm going to start with the non-windowed side, because this one is going to be the toughest one, because depending on how thick you've got your wires here, they may just be a little bit too thick for that cover to slide on snugly, or easily I should say. It'll be snug for sure. So let me grab one of the panels right here without knocking the other one over. There we go. And I'm going to set that in place. And the way that I'm going to do this, those cables do bulge out a little bit. And you can address this one of 2 ways. You can either redo all your wire cabling again to make your lines thinner and move the bulk of the cables where this hump is on the case, on the panel. Or you can do what I'm going to do, which is to simply add even pressure. Make sure everything's lined up. And add even pressure. I'm going to use the length of my arm on the top and the bottom while I slide it forward. And I can feel that the middle of this did not go in, so I'm going to slide it out. I need to put more pressure there. And once again, we'll try sliding it back together, which can be a little tricky, but so far so good. Checking the edges, everything's smooth and flat. Checking the bottom edge here, it's smooth and flat. So I can go ahead and put the 2 thumb screws back in that keep that side panel secured. All right, there we go. There's one. There's the other. And let's flip this up. And we'll turn it around this way so you can see what I'm doing a little better. This is our windowed panel side. And I'm going to go ahead and put the windowed panel right back on. This side should just slide right on without any problems, which it did because there's no obstructions like there is on the other side. And the first 2 screws we took out are the last 2 screws we put in, and that secures your final panel into position. Now, I would recommend turning it on one more time, just to make sure that in the process of putting the panels on, you didn't shake any wires loose. So again, I'm going to plug my monitor in, and then power is last. And we'll hit the power switch, and hopefully everything fires up good. And if I flip this around this way, you should be able to see inside of the case and see the lighting. And depending on the angle you're on, there's different lighting. So I can see the red lighting there when I hit the button. Just see how fast this Windows boots up. I mean, it is fast. You just saw the Windows flag appeared, and boom, the desktop's already up. So it's absolutely dead silent. I don't know if you can really hear that or not, if I'm quiet for a second. That's the noise this computer makes. It is dead silent. So that's fantastic. So now I can go ahead and box it up. Since I know everything works,
This is also a good time, if you haven't done so, check your front USB ports, which we've got up here. Check to make sure all of your USB ports work. Make sure your front audio works like it's supposed to. And provided it does, you should be good to go. In this case, it's ready to be shipped to its new home in Chicago. In fact, let's go ahead and turn that off. And there was an error message on the screen that it basically says nothing's plugged into the sound card. It's got a Sound Blaster chip that's integrated onto the motherboard. And it notices if there's no headphones or speakers plugged in and says, hey, it doesn't appear you're using the sound card. Do you want to disable it? That's what that message was you just saw. So now let me show you how I get this boxed up so we can get it shipped out to its owner. We're going to start by unplugging the video and power. We're going to put the little DVI cover back on. And we're going to remove the keyboard and mouse because that would really suck if I shipped the computer to Chicago with my wireless receivers for my keyboard and mouse. I know I'm going to do it one of these days. I haven't done it yet. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take the plastic that the case shipped in, and we're going to put it right back on the case. And then when you took your case out of the box, you should have noticed if the styrofoam was on the top or if it was on the front. So it's either on the top and bottom or the front and back. On this case, as I recall, it was on the front and back. So the way I would put this back together would be to set it on its back, take this styrofoam piece, one edge of it here is rounded, and then the front is rounded, so it must go on this way. Not exactly rocket science. And if you weren't paying close enough attention, whoops, gotta go this way. There it is. If I wasn't paying close enough attention is what I should have said. But if you were paying close attention, you'll see the handcrafted by Kerry Holzman badges on it. We've got the date and year, or the month and year rather, that it was built on a sticker on the side of the case. And then we also have the Windows 7 Certificate of Authenticity, which verifies this is a genuine copy of Windows, that the customer will always have his product key available anytime he needs to reinstall, which hopefully won't be very often at all. We're going to flip it now onto its other side, and I'm going to grab this. Let me turn this around so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to grab this plastic, and I just want to keep it nice and tidy. And we'll grab the other piece of styrofoam in the box. And this looks like these little cutouts right here on the styrofoam, right down here, look like they're for the feet, so it's got to go on this way. Now, one of the things I need to pay attention to is which way my video card is facing. So my video card is facing towards me. In other words, the video card is seated this way into the motherboard. So the motherboard's right here behind me. So I need to pay attention to that because when I ship this, I don't want to ship it with the video card hanging upside down. Not all the way to Chicago. I think that would be asking for trouble. Now, to get this back in the case, or get the case back in the box rather, I've got the original box right here. And knowing that the video card is plugged in this way, I need this end of the computer to be up. So if I take this box and flip it around, I already drew arrows on the box with a Sharpie marker showing this end up, which means I need my video card to be sitting, I need my motherboard back against this side. If you can see me, maybe I can move a little bit and you can see me. I want the motherboard to face the back of the box, and with the video card, when I ship this, I'm going to ship it like this. So the video card is going to be seated in a down position. I don't want to ship it laying flat like that, or the video card will be hanging upside down. So that's the reasoning behind it. And rather than trying to put a computer back into its box, it's always easier to put a box back around the top of a computer. That just makes life a lot easier right there. I'm going to verify I got my Sharpie marker. I'm going to verify that my arrows are pointing in the right direction here. I want to make sure that, oh, this silver Sharpie is just not showing up like I thought it would. But that's all right. I know that the front of the case, this part here, will be facing straight up. This box needs to ship like this. And the way we ensure that is we put it into another box, and it lays down this way in another box. And then all of the other components and extra hardware will just go right on top of that, since there's nothing fragile here. And then all this will get wrapped with packing paper. And so far everything's arrived perfectly. I hope to maintain that perfect score with this one. I always get a little nervous when I'm shipping a couple thousand miles. Chicago's a long way away from Phoenix. But that's pretty much it. At this point I can go ahead and tape the box back up. And then once I get it taped up, I'm off to FedEx. So that's it for this build video. I hope you enjoy it. And as always, I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.